Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Welcome to another episode of Haqiqatjou, where we discuss religion and politics, the two least controversial subjects. I am your host, Daniel Haqiqatjou, and I'm very happy to be with you all today to discuss and react to one of the biggest shayateen in the world today, which is Benjamin Netanyahu, where Washington, D.C., rolled out the red carpet for this war criminal to come from Israel, fly from Tel Aviv, and come to Washington to speak to his minions, speak to his royal subjects. Sorry. Something in the back of my throat. So I'm very excited to analyze this speech that he gave to Congress just a couple of days ago, and the reaction from politicians, reaction from the media. And this is just a good demonstration of how the world is run, how politics happen. And sometimes you might wonder, wow, never had this problem. So no. Okay, let's see. I think I'm better now. While I'm gathering my breath, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, subscribe to our newsletter. There's a link in the description below. If this stream gets us kicked off of YouTube, then we'll need a way to keep in touch with you. And we primarily would do that through the newsletter. So make sure to sign up. It's through MuslimSkeptic.com. And subscribe to the channel, obviously. So this is a great example, this speech, of how the world works, because the U.S. is a superpower, and for the past century almost, maybe 80 years, the U.S. has exerted this kind of dominance on the world stage. But who does the U.S. bow to? What does the U.S. political establishment bow to? And we got a really clear demonstration of that with this speech to Congress from Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel. So we need to look and watch and analyze what he says, look at how they react, and fact check, basically, not Netanyahu. Because this shaitan, this garbage human, spread so many lies, so much blatant lying propaganda, and this needs to be analyzed. Muslims, of course, you'll understand that he's a liar. You understand him as a war criminal who's perpetrating the biggest genocide of the 20th century. He has been perpetrating that. He's the head of the Likud party, the right-wing party within Israeli politics. But it's a coalition government that they have in Israel. It's not just Likud. He is also allied with the far right, which are under people like Ben Gvir, the ultra-right nationalists within Israel. And that has an impact on the way that the West interacts or portrays Netanyahu and his party and the Israeli government. This is relevant. Why? Because when Netanyahu is giving this speech in Congress, the Democrats were not there. Kamala Harris was not there. The major Democratic figures like Nancy Pelosi was not there. Obviously, Biden was not there. AOC was not there. And they, boycotted, or they protested, or they just were not there to show up. And even Pelosi, as we'll see, made some harsh comments against Netanyahu. Does this mean that the Democrats are with the Palestinian resistance? Does that mean that the Democrats are anti-Zionist? No. They're not anti-Zionist. They're just anti-Netanyahu and the right wing within Israel. But they're 100% on board the Zionist project, and they are 100% Palestinians being under occupation by Israel. So there's no disagreement on that. There's 100% consensus within the Washington establishment on that. There was one Republican who did not show up and attend, contrary to his party, which is Thomas Massie. This is a senator or congressman, and he said, I'm not going to attend this propaganda speech. And AIPAC actually called him an anti-Semite. They labeled him an anti-Semite just for not going and listening to Netanyahu give his propaganda speech. And then Massie responded. He said, well, I don't care which names you call me. I'm not going to go there and be a shill for Israel. So quite a brave statement made by Thomas Massie. And so let's get right into the reaction so that we can get some idea. Now, I'm going to warn you, this is going to be very nauseating. So if you need anti-nausea medication before we go through this, some people are saying that I don't even want to hear this guy's voice. You know, this shaitan is just disgusting. I can understand that. But if you want to get some details to understand how this presidential election is going to shape up in the U.S., who's influencing it, who's pulling strings, and also, you know, what this means for the Middle East, what this means for the Muslim world. It's highly relevant. The direction of this presidential election will have massive consequences for Muslims and the Middle East. So we need to be aware of that. We need to watch and try to understand. If you want to submit a super chat, please do. I will read them, inshallah, periodically throughout the episode. So feel free to contribute to the show. I really appreciate it. But let's get started. Some of you might have noticed my lantern is not on. The battery ran out on the lantern. So I'll have to recharge that. Okay.
Speaker, the Prime Minister of the State of Israel.
Okay, so here he's entering. He's entering Congress, the Capitol building, and just standing ovation. Like, you've never seen, even the president walks in, they don't give him this kind of standing ovation and this welcome. So I have to like fast forward. I had to, the whole display, the whole disgusting display was over an hour long, close to an hour and a half. But because not because the speech is so long, the speech is only about 30 minutes, but they just kept giving him standing ovation, applause over and over and over again, like trained puppies. So that extends what should have only been a 30-minute speech into over an hour. So I'm not going to, torture you with that footage. I'll just fast forward, or I've clipped it so that you don't have to see every single standing ovation. I left some of them in just to show the kind of obsequiousness, subservience, but again, if you think that Israel has an overwhelming influence on the U.S. government, let me just warn you right now that is anti-Semitism, okay? The ADL has made it very clear, AIPAC has made it very clear that if you think that what Netanyahu is doing here and the kind of welcome he gets in the most powerful institution in the land is indicative of overwhelming control of this foreign government on the U.S. political establishment, that is hate. That is hate, and it's anti-Semitism. And we condemn anti-Semitism, don't we? Just want to make that very clear. So don't get any funny ideas. So here is the standing ovation. I have to... this is like 10 times speed. It's still taking like half a minute. We finally... It's like he's a rock star, celebrity. Oh. Still going. They're still standing. This is like, about 5 minutes of uninterrupted applause.
Members of Congress, I now have the high privilege and distinct honor of presenting to you His Excellency Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel. Thank you.
More applause. His Excellency. Like, find me a clip of any other dignitary or head of state that has been called His Excellency in the U.S. Congress. And that was Mike Johnson. He's the Speaker of the House, and he's the one who invited Netanyahu. So the last time Netanyahu was in Congress, I believe, was in 2015 during the Obama years, and he came to basically cry and whine about the Iran deal, the negotiations that the Obama administration had agreed to lift sanctions, some of the sanctions against Iran, in return for Iran promising not to enrich uranium past certain levels. And Netanyahu was against that, and Israel was against that. They wanted sanctions to continue, and obviously, as soon as Trump came into office, he pulled out of that deal, that agreement with Iran. So then Iran continued to enrich uranium, but this is since 2015. This is, I think, in total, Netanyahu has been before Congress in total of 4 times. So this is the latest one.
Thank you. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, Senator Ben Cardin, Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, Senators, members of Congress, distinguished guests. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for giving me the profound honor of addressing this great citadel of democracy for the 4th time.
Woo!
We meet today at a crossroads of history. Our world is in upheaval. In the Middle East, Iran's axis of terror confronts America, Israel, and our Arab friends.
Notice how many times he says Arab friends, Arab allies in this speech. Like, it's a very important part of Israel's policies, foreign policy, and their vision for the future, as we'll see. Note, like, there needs to be a tally or a counter. Someone count how many times he mentions the Arab allies.
This is not a clash of civilizations. It's a clash between barbarism and civilization.
Barbarism.
It's a clash between those who glorify death and those who sanctify life.
Yeah, so glorifying death versus sanctifying life. It's a good point in his talk right at the beginning to bring up the genocide that he is perpetrating and exactly how many Palestinians have been murdered by the Israeli war machine. And there was a study from Lancet. Lancet is the top medical journal in the world. And they have put out a paper last month, or maybe it was earlier this month, just a couple of weeks ago or a few weeks ago, about the estimate of how many Palestinians have been killed. Like, if the conflict ended, let's use a euphemism. If the conflict ended today, how many deaths of Palestinians would we count? And in this Lancet article, they say 186,000, which is about 8% of the population of Gaza. Gaza is a little bit over 2 million. 8% of them will have been murdered by the Israeli state, the terror state of Israel. And this article has been misrepresented throughout the mainstream media, because what the article, what they say about the article is that, oh, no, it's not that 186,000 have been killed. It's 186,000 will be projected to be killed. So it's not actual death toll, it's a projected death toll. This is a misrepresentation of the article. I've highlighted here on the screen the actual methodology that the authors used. And I'll read it so that you can understand. In recent conflicts, such indirect deaths range from 3 to 15 times the number of direct deaths. So basically, they're saying that when you have a war like this, there is going to be damage to infrastructure. There's going to be damage to water supply. There's going to be a spread of disease. There's going to be hospitals destroyed. Healthcare infrastructure is going to be destroyed. All of this in terms of disease and destruction of infrastructure also creates death beyond just someone getting shot or bombed. Those are direct deaths, but what about the indirect deaths? So they estimate, based on all of the data, research data, on other conflicts as well, that when you want to calculate the total number of deaths, one way to calculate that is to take the direct deaths and multiply it 3 to 15 times. At the uppermost 15 times, at the lowermost 3 times. So let's say 100 direct deaths happened. Indirect deaths would be 300. 3 times as much at the lower end. At the upper end, it would be 1,500. So that's their calculation method. So there are about 37,000 direct deaths reported. So it's not implausible to say, well, 4 times that amount are the total deaths when you look at direct plus indirect. So 4 times. So they're not even going at the upper limit. It could be 15 times as many. They're saying only 4 times. It's on the lower end, the lower estimate. And that number, when you get the total deaths, direct plus indirect, that leads to 186,000. That is if, and this is the important caveat. Oh, so this is a projection. This is not actual death. This is a projection. No. It's not a projection. And they make it very clear in the article. If the conflict, if the war stops now, if the IDF stops bombing and stops its siege and allows humanitarian aid to come into Israel today, or when this article is published, or when they did their analysis a month ago, that would be 186 deaths. Because sometimes people will take time to die because they've been starved or because they've been exposed to dirty water. They've gotten all kinds of diseases. That's how many people will die because of what Israel has done up to this point today, if the war ends and Israel stops today, right? If I poison you today, like I put some poison in your drink, it might take you a week to die, but it's not a projected death. Like, I've killed you because I've put this poison, or I've poisoned you to such an extent that you're going to die. I've killed you today. It's not a projected death. Do you see what I'm saying? So if the war ended today, Israel stops its genocide, it's only 186, only, right? But they're not stopping, right? So even this 186 is like a conservative estimate, and it's ongoing. That number is just going to continue to increase as the direct deaths and the indirect deaths mount. This 37,000 number, by the way, this is what they're reporting back in February. This is what they're reporting back in February and March. They just stopped increasing the death count. And why? It's because the Gaza Health Ministry has been so bombed and attacked to such an extent that they can't actually update their number. Like, they don't have a functioning health ministry anymore to even track or identify the bodies of Palestinians that have been killed, all the civilians, all the women and children. There's no tracking. So they've just stopped at this 37,000 number months ago, right? But look at the logic, like understand what this analysis, in this medical journal is about. It's about looking at the total human cost of this siege on Gaza. beyond just the direct deaths, because the indirect deaths Israel is also responsible for. That is also a part of genocide. That is also a part of ethnic cleansing. It's not just killing people with bullets. It's also killing people by starving them. It's killing people by cutting off their water supply, so they have to rely on untreated water, in which case they will get all kinds of communicable diseases. It's about destroying their hospitals, bombing their places of healthcare. That's also part of the war strategy of the terror state. So we have to include all of that in the total deaths. And that's what the Lancet is doing. That's how they got to 186,000. But Zionist media is reporting on this in order to make it seem like, oh, this is just a projection about the future, what could happen. No, this has already happened. 186 has already happened. Those deaths are accounted for. That's the low estimate. The low estimate. It could be much more than that. It could be much more. And when we see all these scenes and all this footage of Gaza being turned into rubble, okay, and the Zionists, celebrating with glee about that, it does seem like it's a very massive underestimate, actually. Okay, let's continue.
For the forces of civilization to triumph, America and Israel must stand together.
Another standing ovation. Like, they are just standing the whole time, basically. By the way, this is a good point to remind people that, okay, this is Congress. Do the American people actually support Congress? No. The overwhelming majority of Americans do not approve of Congress. The number is at about 81%, according to this polling. 81% of Americans disapprove. Only less than 20% approve of Congress. And that number of disapproval, that gets a lot higher when you get to younger generations. Most of this 20% that approves of Congress are like boomers and people who have no clue what is happening in the world. So just because you see this kind of obsequiousness and this disgusting display of, licking the boots of Netanyahu in American Congress, that's not representative of the American people. Just to let you know. Most people, they hate these politicians and they have absolute nothing but disgust for these politicians in Washington, D.C. So just keep that in mind. Don't let these dogs represent the American people as a whole. I just want to say that because it can be easy to get into this mindset that, oh, it's America that supports this kind of genocide of Palestinians, when that's not the case. What you might see on this presentation in Congress or in certain cherry-picked examples that we'll get into later in the show, these are just selected examples to give the impression like everyone in America is on board with the Zionist project and hates Muslims and hates Palestinians. That's just not the case.
Because when we stand together, something very simple happens. We win, they lose.
Every sentence.
And my friends, I came to
every sentence that he says is a standing ovation.
assure you today of one thing: we will win. Ladies and gentlemen, like December 7th, 1941, and September 11th, 2001, October 7th is a day that will forever live in infamy.
Yeah, it's interesting. So he mentions Pearl Harbor, 9/11, and October 7th. And there are big questions surrounding all of these events in terms of who actually perpetrated them. There are conspiracy theories about who perpetrated, like Pearl Harbor, for example. Did the U.S. have foreknowledge that the Japanese were going to bomb Pearl Harbor? in Hawaii? Was this something that they knew of in advance and they just let it happen in order because Washington wanted to get into World War II? This is something that's speculated, and there's a lot of evidence to support that. When it comes to 9/11, who is really behind 9/11? This is something that is discussed, and there's a lot of historical information, documentation that shows that, well, the mainstream narrative is, has holes. There are holes in the narrative. And with October 7th as well, like to what extent? I don't have any doubt that Palestinians have been resisting the occupation and the ethnic cleansing. So I'm not questioning that aspect of it. But to what extent did the IDF stand down? To what extent did the IDF actually allow certain things to happen in order to create this entire war? That is a question that can be analyzed. And you can analyze it without throwing the Palestinians under the bus because they're always attempting to survive. That's the survival instinct. When you are being killed, slowly, you're going to grasp for life. You're going to grasp for air when you're being suffocated by this boa constrictor, snake, serpent that is the Israeli state, the Zionist state. And you're always going to find an opportunity to free yourself. But that can be manipulated. Desperate people can be manipulated. And perhaps this is what has happened. Allahu Alam.
It was the Jewish holiday of Simchat Torah. It began as a perfect day, not a cloud in the sky. Thousands of young Israelis were celebrating at an outdoor music festival. And suddenly, at 6:29 a.m., as children were still sleeping soundly in their beds in the towns and kibbutzim next to Gaza, suddenly heaven turned into hell. 3,000 Hamas terrorists stormed into Israel. They butchered 1,200 people from 41 countries, including 39 Americans. Proportionately, compared to our population size, that's like 20 9/11s in one day. And these monsters, they rape women.
So what is the exchange rate between Americans and Israelis? One Israeli is worth 20 Americans.
They beheaded men. They burned babies alive. They killed.
Okay, so all of this is lies. Burning babies alive. This has been debunked by Haaretz itself. So according to sources, including Israel's National Insurance Institute, kibbutz leaders, and the police, on October 7th, one baby was killed, 10-month-old Mila Cohen. Okay, a 10-month-old baby. That's the only baby that was killed. And it says murdered. Okay, how was it murdered? Well, as if, a soldier put a gun to the baby's head and shot it. No, that's not what happened. That's what the IDF does to Palestinians. But what happened to Mila is, if you look at the confirmed death count, only one Israeli baby was killed. It's horrible. It's tragic. There was a 10-month-old baby named Mili Cohen who was accidentally shot by Hamas gunmen in exchange of fire. So there's exchange of fire, and there are casualties that are unintentional, including this 10-month-old baby. It's sad. For sure, but this wasn't what Netanyahu was saying, that babies are being burned alive. So just a pure lie, and Haaretz, Israeli sources are debunking this.
Parents in front of their children.
So then also we have to know about the Hannibal directive, which was also basically announced very early on in Israeli newspaper sources like Ynet. But also more recently in Haaretz. It was definitively concluded based on interviews with different IDF soldiers and generals that the IDF ordered the Hannibal directive on October 7th to prevent Hamas taking soldiers captive. What is the Hannibal directive? The Hannibal directive is the Israeli military policy that if there's a situation where the enemies are taking hostages, then our policy with the military is to not only kill the enemy, but also to kill the hostages. You need to kill the hostages because that will that's better for our interests if we don't have to negotiate for hostages. So just kill. And that's what the Israeli military did on October 7th. They were killing Israelis as much as they were killing Palestinians, the ones that had come to the music festival and the kibbutzim. So this is confirmed.
And children in front of their parents?
So how many of these 1,200 deaths that he's talking about, how many of them were killed by Palestinians and how many were killed by this Hannibal directive, the IDF, shooting and killing or even bombing using Apache helicopters, Hellfire missiles on the Israeli population itself? There's footage that we can see where it's hard to believe that, oh, it was just Palestinians who did this, who caused this kind of chaos. Look at this footage. So I've sped it up a little, but look at the amount of blown out cars, like burnt to a crisp, like pulverized. Like, this is not the kind of weaponry that Hamas has. Hamas doesn't have this kind of firepower. Yet look at all of these burnt out cars and footage. This kind of footage is being erased from the internet, by the way, because it's, is clear evidence that Hamas couldn't have been responsible for 1,200 deaths. It seems like a large proportion of those deaths were at the hands of the IDF enacting the Hannibal directive.
They dragged 255 people, both living and dead, into the dark dungeons of Gaza. Israel has already brought home 130.
Yeah, so look at this massive pile. Like, there's hundreds of cars here that are just stacked. Like, apparently Hamas did this, using what kind of weaponry? You need massive amount of firepower to cause this kind of damage. And wasn't the entire goal of Hamas to take hostages? Isn't it contrary to that goal of taking hostages to just blow away as many cars as possible? Isn't it more the case? Isn't it more in line with what the IDF wanted to do in terms of the Hannibal directive, to just bomb indiscriminately, fire these Hellfire missiles indiscriminately in order to kill as many civilians and Hamas fighters as possible? That's more in line with that kind of result that we see on the screen is more in line with the IDF's goal, not Hamas's goal of taking hostages.
5 of these hostages, including 7 who were freed in daring rescue operations.
Yeah, so he mentions the daring rescue operation, freeing 4 or 7 hostages. Yeah, this rescue operation that we heard about last month also killed hundreds of Palestinians, civilians. This is how the rescue operations work, huh? But that's fine. The exchange rate, as we said, for Israeli versus Palestinian is just through the roof. For American, one Israeli is worth 20 Americans. Imagine how many Palestinians are worth one Israeli. It must be in the millions.
One of those freed hostages, Noor Gamani, is here in the gallery, sitting near my wife, Sarah. The pain these families have endured is beyond words. I met with them again yesterday, and I promised them this: I will not rest until all their loved ones are home. All of them.
Yeah. He will not rest until all the hostages are home. He keeps saying this, and then later in the speech he'll contradict it. But look at what the BBC has reported and many other outlets. Netanyahu's actual position is that there can be no ceasefire until Israel's war aims are achieved. And what are those aims? One is to bring back the hostages, but the other aim, the bigger aim, is to defeat Hamas. To defeat Hamas and wipe it out. That's the goal. So these two goals are contradictory, because you can bring home the hostages without killing and destroying all of Hamas. And Hamas has actually agreed to that. Hamas has agreed to the U.S. ceasefire deal, actually. And we'll see Kamala Harris point that out, the vice president, later in the presentation. But these are two conflicting goals. You can't have the goal of wiping out Hamas and bringing back the hostages because these are in direct conflict. If you can just agree to a ceasefire, Hamas will give up all the hostages. So many in Israel have been pointing out this kind of lie from Netanyahu that he's so concerned with the hostages, and they're constantly complaining that and protesting against Netanyahu that he doesn't actually care about Israeli lives. All he cares about is advancing the war for his own political purposes, to maintain power within Israel. This is what his critics are claiming. But the point is that all of these tears that he's shedding for hostages, these are crocodile tears. Now, by the way, so much applause and so many tears shed for the Israeli hostages. What does Human Rights Watch say about Palestinian hostages? How many Palestinians are being detained within Israel? And this is from Human Rights Watch. As of November 1st, Israeli authorities held nearly 7,000 Palestinians from the occupied territory in detention for alleged security offenses, according to Israeli human rights organization Haqiqat. Far more Palestinians have been arrested since October 7th attacks in Israel than have been released in the last week. Among those being held are dozens of women and scores of children. So the IDF is taking hostages. Palestinian women are being held hostage and being raped. Palestinian children are being held hostage and are being raped by the IDF, by Netanyahu's military. The majority have never been convicted of a crime, says Human Rights Watch, including more than 2,000 of them being held in administrative detention, in which the Israeli military detains a person without charge or trial. Many of them are being tortured. So 7,000. How many hostages does Hamas have, that we have to be so concerned about? Is it even at the max? It was under 300, right? 300. Or 200 something at the max. And many of them have been released. So yet you have 7,000. Other estimates say 9,000. 9,000 Palestinian hostages being tortured and raped, including many children. So let's keep things in perspective.
I thank President Biden for his heartfelt support for Israel after the savage attack on October 7th. He rightly called Hamas sheer evil. He dispatched 2 aircraft carriers to the Middle East to deter a wider war. And he came to Israel to stand with us during our darkest hour, a visit that will never be forgotten. President Biden and I have known each other for over 40 years. I want to thank him for half a century of friendship to Israel and for being, as he says, a proud Zionist. Actually, he says a proud Irish-American Zionist.
Yeah, so this is Biden. You don't get much variation in the Democratic Party. They all claim to be card-carrying Zionists. Bernie Sanders is a Zionist. Hillary Clinton is a Zionist. Biden is a Zionist. Kamala Harris is a Zionist. They're all Zionists. And they're proud to say it. So just keep that in mind when, and I'm not saying that the right wing is any different. Obviously, the Republicans are the same, if not more so. But the point is that there's no difference of opinion. There's no ikhtilaf when it comes to supporting the Zionist terrorist state. There's two-party consensus on that. So just remember, when some of these left-wing Muslims start pushing you to vote and go participate in the elections, and it's wajib, you have to go vote. And this is the only way we can save Palestine is if you go vote. You'll just be able to recognize that BS.
My friends, for more than 9 months, Israel's soldiers have shown boundless courage. With us today,
boundless courage for terrorism, killing babies.
With us today.
Yeah, if it's boundless courage, give Palestinians 1/10 of the weapons that you have, and then we'll see who's courageous.
Today is Lieutenant Avichai Reuven.
Yeah, so there's the IDF soldier Reuven, or whatever you called him,
Avichai
the Ethiopian black man there.
is an officer in the Israeli paratroopers. His family immigrated to Israel from Ethiopia.
Yeah, so Ethiopian Jew are treated worse than scum in Israel. So this is covered by a lot of human rights activists and even liberal activists in Israel itself. The Ethiopian Jews are treated like worse than second-class citizens. Why? Because Israel is a very racist society, not only against Arabs, but also against blacks. And this comes from Judaism. I've cited many times the Jewish text within the Talmud, where blacks are called Kushis or Kushites, and they are considered to be descended from the son of Noah named Ham, who was cursed by God with black skin. That's their belief about black people. So that's in the Talmud. Racism is inherent to the Jewish religion. And then this is another highly reported on case. Ethiopian women in Israel were given contraceptive without consent. They were basically sterilized by the health ministry for years. Ethiopian women immigrating from Ethiopia to Israel who are considered to be Jews, or they consider themselves Jews, they have been given this kind of sterilization jab for years to reduce their population and to basically limit the demographic growth of blacks within Israel. Like, this is eugenics. This is a type of eugenic policy undertaken by Israel.
Another Israeli is with us here today, and he's stand up right next to Avichai. This is Master Sergeant Ashraf al-Bakhiri.
Ashraf Bakhiri. So basically like a Murtad. I don't know if he considers himself Muslim, but whatever.
Ashraf is a Bedouin soldier from the Israeli Muslim community of Raat. On October 7th, Ashraf, too, killed many terrorists. First, he defended his comrades in the military base, and he then rushed to defend the neighboring communities, including the devastated community of Kibbutz Be'eri. Like Ashraf,
Boo. Boo.
Like Ashraf, the Muslim soldiers of the IDF fought alongside their Jewish, Druze, Christian, and other comrades in arms with tremendous bravery.
These people, by the way, are not celebrated in actual Israel. These people are not celebrated, especially by the right wing. The right wing is extremely racist. Like the pinnacle of racism in Israel society is the right wing, is the Likud party, is Ben Gvir's party. So they only bring them out in the U.S. because they know, oh, the U.S. has these airs towards more multiculturalism. Oh, it's a Jew and a Muslim and a Christian holding hands while they're killing babies. Like, oh, that's so heartwarming. So they, oh, a black man and a white man and a Bedouin man and a Muslim man, they're all holding hands while they ethnically cleanse Palestine. Like, that's heartwarming for the American audience. But actually in Israel itself, they don't have these kinds of multicultural displays because it's a very racist society.
As the Bible says, Am kelavi yakum. They shall rise like lions. They have risen like lions. The lions of Judah, the lions of Israel. Ladies and gentlemen.
Sorry.
The men and women of the IDF come from every corner of Israeli society. Every ethnicity, every color, every creed, left and right, religious and secular. All are imbued with the indomitable spirit of the Maccabees. My friends,
so even the secular people, even the secular Jews have the spirits of the Maccabees from the Bible. Even like the atheists, this is why this is like a ethno state, the Israeli ethno state. It's an ethno supremacist religion of Judaism.
Defeating our brutal enemies requires both courage and clarity. Clarity begins by knowing the difference between good and evil. Yet incredibly, many anti-Israel protesters, many choose to stand with evil. They stand with Hamas.
Hamas.
They stand with rapists and murderers. They stand with people who came into the kibbutzim, into a home. The parents hid the children, the 2 babies, in the attic, in a secret attic. They murder the families, the parents. They find the secret latch to the hidden attic, and then they murder the babies.
Yeah, it never happened, even according to the actual Israeli statistics or the Israeli count of the people who were killed. Israelis, there's only one baby, Millie Cohen, as we said. And she was caught in the crossfire.
Protesters, stand with them. They should be ashamed of themselves.
Yeah, that's the same Haaretz source I already mentioned. Yeah, so it's interesting, Netanyahu in this speech, he doesn't mention the 40 beheaded babies. What happened to that? Remember? The 40 beheaded babies that we're told exist? You know, now he's kind of downgraded. They weren't 40 beheaded babies. There were just 2 babies that were shot from the attic. Like they were hiding in the attic, and then the evil Hamas terrorists just shot the babies. Okay, there's no evidence of this. There's no reports, even in Israel, of this. And then what about the 40 beheaded babies? What about the babies burnt alive? What about that case of a pregnant Israeli that Hamas stabbed and basically killed the baby in utero? What happened to that case? Oh, that was all fake? That was all made up? No, say it ain't so. I thought that was real. I thought those evil Hamas, Palestinian, Arab, evil darkness celebrating death, I thought those monsters killed the babies. So many babies were killed. Wasn't that the case? That's all the news said that. All the news was reporting that. What happened? What happened? Even Joe Biden, says that he saw the 40 beheaded babies. He saw pictures. I saw pictures. Oh, where are those pictures? Oh, they don't exist? You just made it up? Oh, okay. And you're the president. Interesting. You'd think you'd have better intelligence sources. You'd think that the president would verify before going on the news and talking about 40 beheaded babies. Could it be that your racism and your hatred for Muslims, your hatred for Arabs and Palestinians, is that what made you believe whatever lies, your AIPAC handler told you? You'd think, right? You'd think. But so this is like embarrassment. Like it's never been more, the truth has never been more apparent. So when the truth is so apparent to the world, then it makes the liars look so much worse and so much more evil. And that's what we're witnessing. Like we're seeing people who, if they're not worshiping Satan outright themselves, like in actual rituals, which I think is a high possibility that they do. And maybe someone could, we could discuss that possibility and the evidence for that. But even if they're not outright worshiping Satan, with their lies, like lying and dishonesty, covering the truth, distorting the truth, that's the fruit of Satan. That's the bitter fruit. That's the poisonous fruit of Satan, is deception and falsehood. This is what Iblis, this is what Satan has actually spread from the beginning, when he was encouraging and persuading our father and mother, Adam and Hawa, to eat from that tree that God had prohibited them from eating. So he used deception. He said, well, you eat from this and you'll live forever. And this is deception. This is falsehood. So these are the fruits of Satan. And if they're not directly worshiping Satan, then by spreading their falsehood, like the obvious falsehood, the obvious lies that are so clear to the world that even, the sky and the trees and the earth testifies to their lies, that is Satan worship. That is following in the footsteps of Shaitan and doing his bidding in the world. Okay. Applause, 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 applause. Alpha Cobra says, at this point, I think Satan is worshiping them. Good point. Like, look, they're just standing and clapping. It's like going on for 10 seconds. It's unheard of. By the way, this is not like all of these people are not congressmen and congresswomen, because the Dems didn't even show up, right? So that's half of Congress are the Democrats. They didn't even show up. So they just fill the seats. So there are guests and there are people that they invite to make it seem like it's a full house. But this is all just smoke and mirrors.
They refuse to make the simple distinction between those who target terrorists and those who target civilians, between the democratic state of Israel and the terrorist thugs of Hamas.
Hamas!
We recently learned from the National Security Director, U.S. Director of National Intelligence, that Iran is funding and promoting anti-Israel protests in America. They want to disrupt America. So these protesters burn American flags even on the 4th of July. And I wish to salute the fraternity brothers at the University of North Carolina who protected the American flag against these anti-Israel protesters.
So Iran is funding like protesters. Like, who are these protesters like that are burning the American flag? Note that he's saying this right now in this speech because coincidentally, there was flag burning that happened in Washington, D.C., outside the Capitol. I don't know how with Capitol security they were able to burn a flag there. But this was the protest happening, and I'll show you the footage. And supposedly there are Muslims there because there are people saying Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, and then burning the flag. And Netanyahu happened to mention it too. Wow, it's such a lucky coincidence. But like, what kind of idiot moron? Maybe some of these boomers are thinking like, wow, Iran is funding these protesters, like these hippies, these jobless hippies that come out and burn the flag. Like, wow, this is Iran that's funding it. And they don't think, wait, who's funding all of these congressmen to come and lick the boots of Netanyahu? Like, what kind of money is involved there? Like, the kind of money that Iran is using to get these protesters to burn the flag, like people who look like they're homeless. Like, is that a lot of money? Like, even I could like fund them. Even I could fund them. Like, maybe buy them some, a Big Mac from McDonald's, or we're boycotting McDonald's. Maybe I'll buy him some Chick-fil-A. Buy the homeless person some Chick-fil-A so he can burn the flag. Like, you don't need Iran to fund. Like, Iran is funding the protests. They don't. How much money do you need to fund that? Whereas AIPAC is spending $100 million on the behalf of the state of Israel to control like all of this pro-Israel sentiment, this Zionist sentiment in Congress. Like, so what kind of idiot is duped by this psyop?
For all we know, Iran is funding the anti-Israel protests that are going on right now outside this building. Not that many, but they're there throughout the city.
For all we know. The U.S. National Intelligence Director says, it's happening. They're funding it. Like, who believes this kind of crap? This is pure lies, nonsense.
Well, I have a message for these protesters. When the tyrants of Tehran, who hang gays from cranes and murder women for not covering their hair, are praising, promoting, and funding you, you have officially become Iran's useful idiots. Some of these protesters.
Iran, the evil state, will kill you. Iran kills women that don't cover their hair. Iran will kill all those women. So people will believe that. People will believe that that's actually the case, that Iran is killing women who don't wear hijab, like, you don't know anything about Iran. Like, unfortunately, the reality is that so many women there are not wearing hijab and they're just walking in the streets. It's not like, it's actually becoming a problem. Like the amount of inappropriate dress. Like on YouTube, you can watch. There are these vloggers that are in Iran, and they'll go to the Iranian marketplaces, like in Tehran, for example, or Esfahan, and you can see what Iranian society looks like. And it's not a pretty picture. You know, it's not a pretty picture from a Muslim standpoint. They're liberalizing. The population is liberalizing. You have women that are completely inappropriately dressed in some certain places. You think, is this Iran? Is this the Muslim country of Iran, or is this Las Vegas? Is this like the Strip, like the Las Vegas Strip, the way that women are barely covering themselves? Unfortunately, like, this is the reality. But Netanyahu thinks that in Iran, if you don't wear hijab, they're gonna kill you. Hanging gays from cranes, that I'm not sure. Maybe they actually do that. But the woman thing, I have serious questions about.
It's amazing, absolutely amazing. Some of these protesters hold up signs proclaiming gays for Gaza. They might as well hold up signs saying chickens for KFC.
I just find it funny how much emphasis he put on that. Chickens for KFC! I think he was expecting like more applause too, or laughter.
These protesters chant from the river to the sea, but many don't have a clue what river and what sea they're talking about. They not only get an F in geography, they get an F in history. They call Israel a colonialist state. Don't they know that the land of Israel is where Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob prayed, where Isaiah and Jeremiah preached, and where David and Solomon ruled?
Yeah, like all of those descendants of those prophets and of Bani Israel, like, they became Muslim. They converted to Islam. That's who the Palestinians are. This is why you can't do genetic testing in Israel, because it will show that the Palestinians are actually the indigenous population. They're the descendants of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. They're real descendants, and that's what the genetic data shows. But you can't do that kind of testing in Israel because they've outlawed it. They've banned it. That's why the indigenous people are the Palestinians. Those are the descendants of Abraham and Jacob. What is Benjamin Netanyahu's background? He's Polish. His ancestors were in Poland. So many of these Israelis, they're from Europe, Eastern Europe, some of them from Russia. They're not indigenous to the Middle East.
For nearly 4,000 years, the land of Israel has been the homeland of the Jewish people. It's always been our home. It will always be our home.
Didn't say inshallah.
It's not only the campus protesters who get it wrong. It's also the people who run those campuses.
Notice how much he's talking about the campus protests. Like, this was one of the major parts of this speech. He goes on and on about the campus protesters. And this shows you how effective those protests were and will continue to be once the fall semester starts again. And we should support these protests. If you are on a campus, you should participate. Avoid the haram elements. Some of these protests might have a lot of mixing maybe, or any kind of inappropriate activity that's happening at the protests. But in terms of supporting the protests, this is very important, because you can see how much it's agitating Netanyahu, how much it agitates the Zionists. The protests were highly effective in raising awareness against Israel, against Israel's genocide. So, and this is the proof of this is how much he's dedicating to talking about this, how many resources Israel has dedicated to stopping the protests, clamping down on these universities, making sure that they don't happen again. The kind of rhetoric that was used to smear the protesters as violent anti-Semite radicals. in all kinds of mainstream news outlets. So this shows you the efficacy of protesting, and then boycotting as well. Boycotting is the other critical component of suffocating the Zionist state and destroying the support for Zionism in the West.
80 years after the Holocaust, 80 years after the Holocaust, the presidents of Harvard, Penn.
Another point, sorry. The other point is that they know that a lot of the most effective protest movements start in the universities. So a big reason that South Africa was brought to its knees economically is because of protests and boycotts that happened against apartheid South Africa. And that was driven by the universities and students at the universities. So this is what Israel is terrified of. Boycott and divestment is really their, this is the sword against their tyranny. And this is also why the Arab allies that he refers to, is so against protesting, and they have their palace scholars saying that, oh, protesting is haram, boycotting is haram, don't boycott Israel, don't protest Israel, this is all haram. These medkhalis online, the electronic flies, that's the message that they're constantly putting out to Western Muslims in order to stop, in order to protect their master, Netanyahu.
And I'm ashamed to say my alma mater, MIT, couldn't bring themselves to condemn the calls for the genocide of Jews. Remember what they said? They said, it depends on the context. Well,
so the presidents of Harvard University, University of Pennsylvania, and also MIT were brought in front of Congress, and they're questioned. And they're saying, oh, well, there are students on campus calling for the genocide of Jews. What are you doing to stop that? What are you doing to stop that? And then they, the response that was given was not exactly what the Zionists wanted, so they ousted these presidents from these universities. And then look, what were these called? So there were actual students on campus calling for the genocide of Jews? What was that?
Let me give these
befuddled
academics a little context.
Yeah. So this is the joint statement by Harvard Palestine Solidarity Groups on the situation in Palestine. So this is the call for genocide. So when this letter was published, this was shortly after October 7th. It was signed by a lot of different student groups on Harvard's campus. You had billionaire Jew like Bill Ackman saying that, oh, this is radicalism on campus. We have to stop it. We have to dox all of these people who signed, that are part of these student groups at Harvard. We have to dox them, put their information out there so that we can know who the anti-Semites are, the supporters of terrorism. So is this a call to genocide? Let's read it. We, the undersigned student organizations, hold the Israeli regime entirely responsible for all unfolding violence after October 7th. Today's events did not occur in a vacuum. For the last 2 decades, millions of Palestinians in Gaza have been forced to live in an open-air prison. Israeli officials promised to open the gates of hell, quote unquote, and the massacres in Gaza have already commenced. Palestinians in Gaza have no shelters for refuge and nowhere to escape. In the coming days, Palestinians will be forced to bear the full brunt of Israel's violence. The apartheid regime is the only one to blame. Israeli violence has structured every aspect of Palestinian existence for 75 years, from systematized land seizures to routine airstrikes, arbitrary detentions to military checkpoints, and enforced family separations to targeted killings. Palestinians have been forced to live in a state of death, both slow and sudden. Today, the Palestinian ordeal enters into uncharted territory. The coming days will require a firm stand against colonial retaliation. We call on the Harvard community to take action to stop the ongoing annihilation of Palestinians. This statement was co-authored by a coalition of Palestine solidarity groups at Harvard. For student safety, the names of all original signing organizations have been concealed at this time. So originally there was a list of organizations, but they had to conceal that in order to protect students on campus from getting doxxed by Zionists. And so, this is a call for genocide of Jews, right? You saw it, right? I read it. It was basically like I was reading a Hitler speech. It's like I was reading a speech from Hitler in the Third Reich, calling for the genocide of Jews. That's what we just read, right? So just for this, like the fact that this was allowed to be published, that there were student groups that allowed this on campus, this means that there's calls for genocide of Jews, and we have to oust the presidents and the administrations of these campuses or these universities that allowed this. So it's ridiculous.
Anti-Semitism is the world's oldest hatred. For centuries, the massacre of Jews was always preceded by wild accusations. We were accused of everything from poisoning wells, to spreading plagues, to using the blood of slaughtered children to bake Passover matzahs. These preposterous anti-Semitic lies led to persecution, mass murder, and ultimately to history's worst genocide, the Holocaust. Now, just as malicious lies were leveled for centuries at the Jewish people, malicious lies are now being leveled at the Jewish state. No, don't applaud.
Where people, they got their wires mixed up. They're about to start applauding and giving a standing ovation about Israel, malicious lies against Israel. Oh! Listen. Like, look how he's talking to these congressmen. Like, hey, did I tell you to clap? Sit down. Sit down and shut up. I'm not done talking. You'll clap and give me a standing ovation when I tell you to. Like, this is the kind of like, oh, yeah, this... Israelis and Jews are not powerful at all. They're not powerful or influential at all. Like, I think that's pretty clear, right?
Outrageous slanders that paint Israel as racist and genocidal are meant to delegitimize Israel, to demonize the Jewish state, and to demonize Jews everywhere. And no wonder we've witnessed an appalling rise of anti-Semitism in America and around the world. My friends, whenever and wherever we see the scourge of anti-Semitism, we must unequivocally condemn it and resolutely fight it, without exception. And don't be fooled when the blood libels against the Jewish state come from people who wear fancy silk robes and speak in lofty tones about law and justice. Here's a case in point. The prosecutor of the International Criminal Court has shamefully accused Israel of deliberately starving the people of Gaza. This is utter, complete nonsense. It's a complete fabrication.
Anti-Semitism. So basically the Hague International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, they're anti-Semites. They're part of this malicious rise in anti-Semitism. They just make up stuff against Jews. They make stuff up against Israel, the only Jewish state, might I remind you. This is blatant anti-Semitism. This is blood libel. So take note. The International Criminal Court of Justice, they're anti-Semites. They're just driven by an irrational hatred of the Jewish people. They don't hate anyone else. You know, these dastardly judges on the criminal court. They're not driven by hatred of blacks. They're not driven by hatred of whites. They're not driven by hatred of Asians. They're not driven by hatred of Arabs. You know, they're all in on it because guess what? The International Criminal Court, the judges are from many different nations and many different races. But all the races, all of them are united in this irrational hatred of the Jewish race. That's quite a feat. That's quite, a coordination, a union, a unification of hearts and minds in hatred against Jews. It's despicable. It's disgusting. We need to do something about this hatred. What can we do about the International Criminal Court, guys? What can we do about the International Criminal Court of Justice? Like maybe the ADL can sue them. Maybe we can sue the International Criminal Court. I think that, like, there's got to be a solution to stop these anti-Semites from spreading their hate through adjudication in court.
Israel has enabled more than 40,000 aid trucks to enter Gaza. That's 500,000 tons of food. And that's more than 3,000 calories for every man, woman, and child in Gaza.
Lies.
If there are Palestinians in Gaza who aren't getting enough food, it's not because Israel is blocking it, it's because Hamas is stealing it.
Hamas is stealing all the food. Okay, then why is the United Nations saying that, their experts saying that Israel is carrying out targeted starvation campaign in Gaza? So the UN, they're anti-Semites, obviously. The United Nations, from all the countries in the world, they're all anti-Semites. Their experts are saying Israel is starving Palestinians deliberately. They're just fabricating that. Just because of irrational hatred for Jews. Obviously. And then the AP, Associated Press, is reporting that far-right groups that block aid to Gaza receive tax-deductible donations from U.S. and Israel. So there are far-right groups in Israel that block aid. They're blocking the trucks, and you can see the footage of these. It's like these Jewish men, women, and their children, and they're creating a blockade, and then they attack the aid trucks, and they destroy the food. Okay, why? In order to starve Palestinian women and children and genocide the population. And those groups get donations from the U.S. and it's tax deductible. They're like filing that in their taxes, and they're trying to, save on their tax return, getting that refund because they donated to these groups. Like this is completely outrageous. And then. So this is a fact check done by the AP on Netanyahu's speech. So he's claiming that, there's all this tons of food that is being sent into Gaza in terms of aid. So the actual facts, Israel initially imposed a complete siege on Gaza in the early days of the war, and under U.S. pressure, gradually eased it to allow the entry of food and humanitarian supplies. So the original policy, if it hadn't been for U.S. pressure, was to starve Gaza to death. While Israel says it allows hundreds of truckloads of goods to enter Gaza each day, the United Nations and aid groups say they are often unable to reach it or distribute. They say ongoing Israeli military operations and fighting with Hamas and lawlessness makes it too difficult to operate. UN officials say criminal gangs have targeted aid trucks. Yeah, you forgot to mention that these are Israeli Jewish criminal gangs. But a top U.S. envoy said Israel has presented no evidence for claims Hamas is stealing aid, adding that Israel's killing of Gaza police commanders guarding truck convoys have made it nearly impossible to distribute goods. So this is a top U.S. envoy. Top officials are all saying the same thing. This is a deliberate starvation campaign. Even the trucks that are allowed to go into Gaza are being attacked. They're being stopped by criminal gangs like these far-right Jewish groups. And even the IDF is targeting the aid trucks. And this was one of the incidents that happened. This happened back in April. There was a shipment of humanitarian aid that reached Gaza. And then the IDF started shooting. As the Palestinians came to take food, like flour, bags of flour, the IDF started firing and killing Palestinians. So this is the worst kind of terrorism. People are starving. They want to get just a bag of flour so that they can make dry bread to fill their stomachs and to stave off the starvation. And the IDF, these monsters, are shooting at them and indiscriminately killing children along with men. And the Western media is reporting this. Massacre. Dozens killed by Israeli fire in Gaza while collecting food aid. More than 100 killed and about 750 wounded after Israeli forces fired at Palestinians trying to get flour for their families as famine stalks the Gaza Strip. So look at the inhumanity and look at the blatant lies. This is the New York Times. Israeli strikes an aid convoy, prompts condemnation and an apology from Netanyahu. So this is like the World Kitchen. This is an aid organization, and they told they're going into Gaza to provide aid to starving Palestinians, and the IDF blows them out of the water, basically. Just attacks them and kills 7, I think, aid workers. Like, these are Western aid workers, and they get murdered by the IDF, even though the IDF knew that there were aid workers. They're in clearly marked vehicle that says that they're aid workers. They had told the IDF in advance their location to avoid being shot at, but the IDF deliberately targeted them. And it was so bad, it was so blatant, and the international media was so enraged, or the international community was so enraged, that Netanyahu was basically forced to apologize. Like, that's how blatant it was. He can't even say that, oh, it was Hamas hiding in the aid truck. He couldn't even use that excuse. So, yeah, no, how can you say that, oh, we're allowing all these trucks of aid to go into Gaza, oh, but it's Hamas who's stealing the aid? Where's the evidence that Hamas is stealing aid? Like, Hamas doesn't have any more centralized location or base. Like, there is no centralized Hamas force anymore. They're in their tunnels. They're hiding. They're hiding in tunnels. They're not even communicating with each other. You know, this is what all of the analysts say about Hamas's strategy. There's not even centralized communication. So where is the evidence that they're attacking aid trucks? All the evidence shows that it's the IDF and far-right terror groups, Jewish terror groups, that are attacking these aid shipments.
So much for that lie, but here's another. The ICC prosecutor accuses Israel of deliberately targeting civilians. What in God's green earth is he talking about? The IDF is...
I mean, you have to just laugh at the level of lying. So this is Satan worship.
Millions of flyers, sent millions of text messages, made hundreds of thousands of phone calls to get Palestinian civilians out of harm's way.
Yeah, how are you sending text messages? Like, you've blown away all of their communications, their telecommunications. Like, what kind of text messages are you sending? So UN chief says Gaza becoming a graveyard for children. This is by Reuters. Sorry.
What in God's green earth is he talking about? The IDF has dropped millions of flyers, sent millions of text messages, made hundreds of thousands of phone calls to get Palestinian civilians out of harm's way.
So Israeli airstrikes that killed 44 civilians, further evidence of war crimes, new investigation. This was back in May. International Criminal Court should investigate as war crimes 3 Israeli airstrikes that killed 44 Palestinian civilians, including 32 children in the occupied Gaza Strip last month, Amnesty International said. So, I mean, if I want to go through all of the headlines of the IDF deliberately targeting civilians, we'd be here for over 24 hours, basically. There's just so much evidence. So for him to say, like, this shaitan, this piece of crap that, oh, there's no evidence, or subhanallah. Israeli military is destroying hospitals and targeting medical staff in Gaza, doctors and nurses there say. So how many hospitals? Dozens of hospitals have been targeted and destroyed. Like, if you, and on what basis? Like, oh, this is a Hamas secret base. So every single hospital is a Hamas secret base. You've destroyed every single hospital in Gaza. And even if Hamas is there, like, what is the justification? Like, if I told you that, oh, you know, there's a terrorist, like, oh, there's a mass shooter. This happens, right? There's a mass shooter, and the mass shooter is in the school, or the mass shooter is in the hospital. Is the logic there that, oh, we should just bomb the school, or we should just bomb the school, we should bomb the hospital, just destroy the hospital, and it doesn't matter who's inside? Like, this whole human shields argument that Israel uses to justify the destruction of hospitals, refugee camps, schools, everything else, apartment buildings. Think about the logic. Like, does any of these people actually stop to think of the logic? Like, is it justified to just kill dozens, hundreds of people just because there's a terrorist, like legitimately say, okay, there is actually a terrorist in this location, in this apartment building. There's hundreds of civilians, but there's one terrorist. Are we justified in bombing and blowing up that building just to get that one terrorist? No. Even like secular morality would not allow that. So how can this whole, and it's shocking like how many Zionists constantly use the human shields argument, but it doesn't even meet like a basic standard of humanity, like human morality. And these people claim to be humanists. Bloodbath. Israel continues to target Gaza hospitals and civilians. No let up in Israel's onslaught despite mounting calls for a truce in aid deliveries. From CNN, questions mount over Israel's killing of journalists. So they're killing doctors, they're killing aid workers, they're killing journalists. Israel has killed more journalists in the past 9 months than have ever been killed in the 20th century from any conflict. This is the IDF. No place of refuge. Israeli strikes hit Gaza refugee camps. Israeli airstrikes devastated parts of the Jabalia refugee camp in North Gaza this week, flattening buildings in a densely populated area where Palestinian authorities say at least 197 civilians were killed and scores more are still missing. So they tell the Palestinians to evacuate with the flyers and the text messages that somehow are able to get to Palestinian phones when they don't have electricity and they don't have any internet or they don't have any telecommunications. Somehow they're getting these text messages, and the text messages are saying, oh, go to the refugee camp, go to these designated areas, and then the IDF bombs those areas, bombs those camps. Like, this is called sadism. This is called sadism, and again, it's driven by Israeli culture. It's driven by Judaism as a religion. Not all Jews are sadistic, but you see the kinds of sadism that's used against Palestinians and Arabs. And all these international agencies are commenting on it, and they are documenting it. Murdering journalists, like this is a violation of the Geneva Conventions. Like these are war crimes, plain and simple. It's already been adjudicated in criminal court. And even like these international institutions that are usually bought and paid for by the Zionists, even they're too embarrassed to side with Israel on the genocide that they're committing. Like that the price is too high. And what does Israel turn around and do? They have their prime minister Netanyahu come and say that, oh, they're anti-Semites. These are all anti-Semites.
For Israel, every civilian death is a tragedy.
Oh, yeah.
For Hamas,
if it's every civilian death is a tragedy, why do you have the Hannibal directive? Why do you have a deliberate policy of targeting your own civilians, let alone Palestinians? They don't even have regard for their own civilians. They think it's better to kill your own civilians than allow them to be captured by the enemy. That's the Hannibal directive. You don't even care about your own citizens, let alone the civilians, let alone Palestinian civilians. Or American civilians for that matter. You know, this is what the wars for Israel are all about. The war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, the war in Libya, the war in Syria, the war in Yemen, all of these wars that Israel drags the U.S. into on false pretenses. Who's fighting? It's U.S. soldiers, right? It's U.S. soldiers. I'm not shedding tears for U.S. soldiers who go there and kill Muslims. But, you know, Israel doesn't care for Americans to die, obviously.
Strategy. They actually want Palestinian civilians to die so that Israel will be smeared in the international media and be pressured to end the war before it's won.
No. So the Israeli logic. A terrorist is hiding in a school full of children or a hospital full of children and the elderly. So let's bomb the school and kill all the children. You know, that's their logic. Like, this is the human shield argument. How does that make any sense? How are your biggest propagandists, your most popular propagandists, people like Alan Dershowitz, are constantly trotting out this human shields argument? It makes you look like a monster. It makes you look like completely devoid of any moral sense. But it's because they don't see Palestinians as human beings. And in certain cases, I think they don't see non-Jews as human beings. That's the Jewish theology. That's what Judaism actually teaches, that non-Jews, the Gentiles, are not actually human. Only Jews are from Adam and have the divine spirit. Non-Jews have the satanic spirit. That is the teaching of the Talmud and the greatest sages of Judaism.
This would enable Hamas to survive another day, and as they vowed, to carry out October 7th again and again and again. Well, I want to assure you, no matter what pressure is brought to bear, I will never allow that to happen. The vast majority of Americans have not fallen for this Hamas propaganda. They continue to support Israel. And I want to say thank you, America, and thank you, senators and House members, who continue to support us, continue to support Israel, continue to support the truth, and see through the lies. But as for the minority that may have fallen for Hamas's conch job, I suggest you listen to Colonel John Spencer. John Spencer is head of urban warfare studies at West Point. He studied every major...
This is John Spencer. Like, the Zionists keep trotting him out. He was even interviewed by Jordan Peterson, featured on Daily Wire with Ben Shapiro. And he's like some schmuck, like some loser, some failed army guy. And he goes like, oh, I've studied every urban conflict. And oh, Israel is amazing. Israel is just so moral, the most moral army in the world. And they just trot him out like as this expert. Oh, the U.S. military expert says we're the most moral army. So who can argue with that? You have on the one hand, the ICJ, the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, the Hague, and the UN. And on the other hand, you have John Spencer. Who are you going to trust? Who are you going to trust? I ask you. I ask you, who can be more trustworthy than this face? Look at John Spencer. Look at this. It's like the face of honesty. You can't find a more honest man than John Spencer. He says we're the most moral army. Who can argue with that?
Urban conflict. I was going to say in modern history. He corrected me. No, in history. Israel, he said.
He's an expert on all urban conflict in history. There's not a single historical period that he doesn't have expertise over. This guy. And when you hear him talk, he sounds like he barely has a high school education.
Has implemented more precautions to prevent civilian harm than any military in history and beyond what international law requires. Beyond
what international law requires. This is why it's so ridiculous for the ICC and the ICJ to accuse Israel of war crimes and to declare Netanyahu a war criminal, because we actually follow international law. We go beyond the requirements of international law. So obviously this is anti-Semitism. It's clear anti-Semitism.
That's why, despite all the lies you've heard, the war in Gaza has one of the lowest ratios of combatants to non-combatants casualties in the history of urban warfare. And you want to know where it's lowest in Gaza?
Yeah, just you already murdered 8% of the population. But that's the lowest. And 8% is the low estimate, by the way.
It's lowest in Rafa. In Rafa. Remember what so many people said? If Israel goes into Rafa, there'll be thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of civilians killed. Well, last week, I went into Rafa. I visited our troops as they finished fighting Hamas's remaining terrorist battalions.
Yeah, the remaining terrorist battalions? Like, what are you talking about? All the reports and all the military analysis says that Hamas fighters are throughout the Gaza Strip, including in the north, the parts where Israel claims that they've cleared out from Hamas. The Hamas is still there because there are so many tunnels, and these fighters are just hiding. This is guerrilla warfare. So they're not even close to eliminating Hamas. Instead, in Rafa, this is the refugee camp that they told the part in southern Gaza that they told all the Palestinians to evacuate to. They told 2 million Palestinians to evacuate in northern and mid-Gaza. And they just gave them 24 hours before they started to bomb. And the UN experts obviously consider this to be a joke. Like, how can you consider this to be a fair warning? 2 million people cannot evacuate in 24 hours, and then you start your bombing, which is killing, disproportionately civilians, women, children, the elderly. But this is, and then you're taking them to Rafa, and then you're bombing Rafa as well. You're bombing the refugee camp as well. And then here you're saying, oh, there's no one. We had so little civilian casualties.
I asked the commander there, how many terrorists did you take out in Rafa? He gave me an exact number, 1,203. I asked him, how many civilians were killed? He said, Prime Minister, practically none.
Practically none.
With the exception of a single incident.
Just
where
one
shrapnel
incident.
from a bomb hit a Hamas weapons depot.
Oh, Hamas
and
weapons
unintentionally
depot.
killed 24 people.
24.
The answer is practically none.
Practically none. 24, that's practically none. That's nothing. 24. 24 civilians, that's absolutely nothing. We were aiming for a weapons depot. Yeah, because Hamas has these weapons depots that they just keep everywhere. We targeted that. And there are just 24 civilians nearby that were ended. And how many terrorists did you kill? 1,200? 1,200? Hamas, they're just where? They're gathered, in their little Hamas meeting. Like they had maybe a Hamas conference in the auditorium. They're all gathered there. Or maybe they were watching a football game, the Hamas football game. They're all watching it, playing soccer for you Americans. And then it was so lucky. They're all gathered there in one central location. The IDF could just take them all out. 1,203, the exact number of Hamas terrorists. We know. Who falls for this? Who falls for these lies? First of all, they consider anyone who is basically male. I mean, they consider children to be Hamas terrorists too. They consider, because children throw rocks, right? That's terrorism. So they consider little children to be Hamas terrorists. So when they say 1,200, we got 1,200 Hamas terrorists in Rafa refugee camp, they're probably counting children too. They count women as well. Like their definition of what counts as a Hamas terrorist is ever evolving and extremely vague and loose standards. So it means nothing. Barely none, like practically no civilians, just 24. This is like such... Like the lies aren't even...
You want to know why?
I don't want to say the lies aren't convincing. Obviously, they're not convincing, but they're not even like... It's like he's not even attempting to make it plausible.
Because Israel got the civilians out of harm's way, something people said we could never do, but we did it.
Israel, this is from ABC News. Israel Gaza updates, death toll in Rafah airstrike rises to 50. So even like his nonsense statement that 24, even that's refuted. Netanyahu calls civilian deaths in Rafah after latest Israeli attacks tragic mistake. So this was another strike. Global outrage over latest Israel attack. Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called an Israeli strike that killed at least 45 Palestinians over the weekend a tragic mistake and called for an investigation into the civilian deaths Monday. The Israeli strike on the Tal al-Sultan neighborhood of Rafah targeted a humanitarian zone filled with tents where Israel's military previously instructed displaced Palestinians to shelter from the ongoing war against militant group Hamas. The Gaza Health Ministry said the Israeli military claimed the strike killed 2 senior Hamas leaders. So this is the refugee camp. They're bombing refugee camps that they told the Palestinians to evacuate to. And it's so bad, it's causing so much outrage. And the video that you see is so shocking and it's so disturbing. Children being maimed, being burned alive, like horrific images that will give you nightmares for the rest of your life. The entire world is seeing this, and they're seeing that Israel is perpetrating this. He has to make this apology, like this mealy-mouthed apology. 45 Palestinians being killed. He can't even get the number right when he's talking to Congress. Even his dumb estimate is not consistent, or his dumb claim that only 24 civilians were killed. It's not even consistent with his own apology. My whole family has perished. 22 killed in Israeli airstrike on Rafah, hospital staff say. So these are all separate incidents. Like these are separate strikes. on a hospital, 22 are killed. Who airstrikes a hospital? So this is the Jewish state.
These heroes here today, the heroic soldiers of Israel, should not be condemned for how they're conducting the war in Gaza. They should be commended for it.
Yeah, so these are the heroes we should commend. The IDF heroes. Oh, look, they're gleefully playing with children's toys. The children that they've massacred, they're having fun with the bikes. Oh, look at all these brave heroes playing with a Cabbage Patch doll, a Palestinian child's doll. After they've murdered the children, they're, having fun and taking pictures and posting on Instagram. Here's another IDF soldier inside a Palestinian's home playing with the doll right next to his machine gun. Look, these are the bikes of 3-year-old, 4-year-olds. And these brave soldiers, Jewish soldiers, we should commend them. Wow, you murdered the Palestinian children and then you're having fun on their toys. That's so commendable. Netanyahu is so right. He's literally sleeping in a crib. In a Palestinian baby's crib, he is sleeping in it, like mock sleeping, to mock the death of the baby that he just murdered. Just look at this. This is the IDF. This is the most moral army. John Spencer, or whatever the hell his name is, said it's the most moral, way beyond the requirements of international law. Posing with women's underwear. This is... The thing is that Israel could have had a policy, like the IDF could have had a policy of don't post these pictures, not because we don't think it's all fun and games. And yeah, you should mock the women and children that you've slaughtered. We don't have a problem with that, but just for the sake of appearances, just for the sake of, not creating this scandal internationally where people are not going to find it too funny how you're mocking the victims of ethnic cleansing, maybe don't post these pictures. The IDF could have that policy, but they don't. Like, that's how egregious, that's how outrageous, that's how in your face. No, we're going to genocide the Palestinians, and then we're going to mock their genocide in front of the entire world. We're going to post the pictures on social media. We're not going to get banned because guess what? We operate all of these platforms, and we are the ones who determine what is considered hateful or not, what is considered genocidal or not. We can mock the deaths of Palestinians. We can deny that there's a genocide happening. We're going to do it all in your face. There's nothing that you can do about it. And if you make a peep and if you say anything against that, you're an anti-Semite. You're an anti-Semite. So imagine, don't you think this is going to generate a lot of hatred? Isn't this going to generate a lot of animosity towards these people? Just a question. Look, this is like the wedding shoes of a Palestinian woman. They've killed the women and he's now taking the shoes and he's making a comment like, oh, I'm going to have this for my engagement party. That was the caption on this photo. Alhamdulillah, I think this pig got liquidated. So
I want to thank all of you here today who forcefully opposed the false accusations of the ICC and stood up for the truth. These lies are not only libelous, they're downright dangerous.
No, they're anti-Semitic.
The ICC is trying to shackle Israel's hands and prevent us from defending ourselves. And if Israel's hands are tied, America is next. And I'll tell you what else is next. The ability of all democracies to fight terrorism will be imperiled. That's what's on the line. So let me assure you, the hands of the Jewish state will never be shackled. Israel will always defend itself.
It's very interesting how this expression comes up over and over again by some of these Jewish extremists. They say that the hands of our nation are not shackled. The hands of the Jews are not shackled. They use this. And this is what Allah says in the Quran. And the Jews say the hands of Allah are shackled. The hands of God are shackled. And then Allah responds to them, chained are their hands, and they're cursed for what they say. So Allah has cursed them for this statement against Allah, because they accused Allah of being stingy, and God is too stingy. He's not giving us. He's withholding from us. Allah is stingy. Like, imagine making that kind of accusation against Allah, against the Creator. But Allah responds to them. He responds and says, no, your hands are chained. You are cursed for this kind of disobedience and this kind of rebellion against God. And then Allah says, both Allah's hands are extended. He spends however He wills, and that which has been revealed to you from your Lord will surely increase many of them in transgression and disbelief, and we have cast among them animosity and hatred until the day of resurrection. Every time they kindled the fire of war against you, Allah extinguished it, and they strive throughout the land, causing corruption, and Allah does not like corruptors. Mufsideen, they're creating fasad. This is an important expression in the Quran, and we'll see another verse that has the same expression. Fasad, that they create. So it's interesting that Netanyahu in this moment says that our hands are not chained, in defiance of what the Quran says. So who do you think is going to win? Netanyahu and the terror state, or Allah? And this reminded me of the article by Rabbi Shmuley. Rabbi Shmuley, which you might have heard of, the most famous American rabbi. He wrote this article in the Jerusalem Post, Is God an Anti-Semite? Where he accuses God of potentially being an anti-Semite. And this reminded me of this verse as well. Accusing God of being stingy or not giving. And Shmuley ends his article like this. No, God is not an anti-Semite. The very fact that the Jewish people still exists proves it, but it's high time that He started showing His love rather than just talking about it. SubhanAllah. So can you imagine saying this about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Saying this about Allah, the Creator, the Almighty, the All-Powerful, the All-Merciful, the All-Generous Allah. You're accusing Him of being stingy. You're saying He better start showing His love. He better start showing it. Like, who are you? Who are you to say such a thing to Allah? So this is the curse. Like, you're going to bring the curse of Allah on you. You're going to bring the destruction of Allah on you for these kinds of statements. And it's exactly what the Quran says. Exactly. So, subhanAllah. So people of understanding, people of intellect, people of reflection will read these verses and they know the truth that has come from Allah. And the people who are corrupt and the people who are evil, they hear these verses and it only increases them in disbelief and transgression. And increases them in animosity towards the believers because they see the truth and they cover it. They see the truth and it makes them bitter and angry, and then they attack and they are even more belligerent. And that only increases their punishment and increases the torment that they will face in this life and the next. So just read and marvel at the beauty and the power of the words of Allah.
My friends, in the Middle East, Iran is virtually behind all the terrorism, all the turmoil, all the chaos, all the killing.
Iran is behind all the turmoil and terrorism. They were saying this about Iraq. You know, this is what Israel was saying. Israel is behind, Iraq is behind all the terrorism. They have weapons of mass destruction. This is what they're saying about Syria, Bashar al-Assad. This is what they're saying about Libya, Gaddafi. This is what they say about the Houthis. This is what they say about Hezbollah. They're behind all of the terrorism. Whoever they want to attack becomes the backers of all the terrorism in the world. Now it's Iran.
And that should come as no surprise. When he founded the Islamic Republic, Ayatollah Khomeini pledged, "We will export our revolution to the entire world. We will export the Islamic revolution to the entire world." Now ask yourself, which country ultimately stands in the way of Iran's maniacal plans to impose radical Islam on the world? And the answer is clear.
The maniacal plans of Iran to impose radical Islam. Yeah, this is Iran, right? The Iran that I know of, doesn't really have high enough GDP to impose radical Islam on the entire world. Am I the only one who's hearing of this plot? This dastardly plot of the Ayatollahs to impose radical Islam on the entire world. I'm not sure I've ever heard of this plot. The Ayatollah wants to come and rule over America and impose radical Islam on America.
It's America, the guardian of Western civilization and the world's greatest power. That's why Iran sees America as its greatest enemy. Last month, we heard a revealing comment, ostensibly about the war in Gaza, but about something else. It came from the foreign minister of Iran's proxy, Hezbollah, and he said this: "This is not a war with Israel. Israel," he said, "is merely a tool. The main war, the real war, is with America." Iran's regime has been fighting America from the moment it came to power. In 1979, it stormed the American embassy. It held scores of Americans hostage for 444 days. Since then, Iran's terrorist proxies have targeted America in the Middle East and beyond. In Beirut, they killed 241 US servicemen. In Africa, they bombed American embassies. In Iraq, they supplied explosives to maim and kill thousands of American soldiers. In America, they actually sent death squads. They sent death squads here to murder a former Secretary of State and a former National Security Advisor. And as we recently learned, they even brazenly threatened to assassinate President Trump.
Oh, they even brazenly attempted to assassinate President Trump. Iran, it's like a terror state. They're just acting like these maniacal mullahs that they just want to bomb the entire world and bring radical Islam, Shia Islam, of course, to dominate the entire globe. Yeah, so like even the American soldiers in Iraq. Oh, you mean the American soldiers that were invading Iraq at the behest of Israel? Like the American soldiers that invaded a Muslim country and murdered 1 million Iraqis, almost 2 million according to some estimates, and created over 30 million refugees. Oh, that American force? Oh, Iran is the terrorist, though. Iran is the terrorist. Or maybe the Iraqis. The Iraqis are terrorists for fighting back. So look at the way that they spin the world. Like according to this conception of the world, the U.S. owns the entire globe. So if there are American soldiers in Iraq, or there are American soldiers in Iran itself, or in Palestine, or wherever, if you fight back, you're a terrorist. Because we own the world. We own the entire world. We have a right to be in every country. We have a right to control every country and its resources. And if you don't like it and you fight back, then you're a terrorist. At best, you're a terrorist. At worst, you're an anti-Semitic terrorist. That's even worse. So this is their understanding of the entire globe. And now the new Aqidah, the new belief system just dropped that actually Iran, this whole time it was Iran. You thought it was Saddam Hussein. You thought it was Gaddafi. You thought it was Bashar al-Assad. Like, no, those are just puppets of the Iranian regime. It's really, Iran has been masterminding everything that's happened, for the past 100 years. This is what we're supposed to believe from Netanyahu.
But Iran understands that to truly challenge America, it must first conquer the Middle East. And for this, it uses its many proxies, including the Houthis, Hezbollah, and Hamas. Yet in the heart of the Middle East, standing in Iran's way, is one proud pro-American democracy, my country, the State of Israel.
So this is also something that was said by Trump. So Trump clipped part of the speech where he Netanyahu mentions the assassination attempt is actually from Iran. And then Trump says this bizarre statement: if they do assassinate President Trump, which is always a possibility, I hope that America obliterates Iran, wipes it off the face of the earth. If that does not happen, American leaders will be considered gutless cowards. This is Donald Trump saying this. So what? How does this make any sense? Does he actually believe that the assassination attempt was from some Iranian? No, it was from this white liberal, this Thomas Crooks. Thomas Crooks, that's not an Iranian name. Doesn't have any Iranian heritage. He's not a secret Persian. He's not like part of the Revolutionary Guard. So you know who the shooter was. You're saying that, okay, that wasn't the real shooter, or that was just a proxy. But really, it was Iran. So is Iran telling the Secret Service to stand down? Is Iran telling the Secret Service, oh, make sure you have this rooftop within 200 yards of the president's podium, completely unprotected and uncovered? That was Iran, right? Iran has some secret agents within the Secret Service that they're calling the shots and telling the Secret Service to back off so that our shooter, Thomas Crooks, like Thomas Crooks, what's a Iranian name that's similar to Thomas? Thomas Crooks is on the roof and he's shooting at Trump. So does the Don think that that's what actually happened? So why is he believing that? And second of all, he's basically putting, what I think actually happened here is that one of Trump's advisors, maybe his AIPAC handler, told him that, maybe it was Jared Kushner actually told him that his son-in-law, Iran was behind this. Netanyahu is right. Iran was behind the assassination attempt. And then Donald, in his, with his two neurons in his head, says, I better deter Iran. I better deter Iran from even thinking about assassinating me. I'll warn them. If you assassinate me, Iran, we're going to blow you away. We're going to wipe you off the map. So you better watch yourself. Don't try it again. Don't try to kill me again. But now you've just incentivized another country. I'll give you a hint. The only democracy in the Middle East, you've incentivized their intelligence apparatus, which, by the way, has a long history of assassinating political leaders in other countries and even in America. You've incentivized them to come and kill you, to assassinate you. Is that what you wanted to do, Donald? Because that's what Israel wants. This is what Netanyahu wants. His whole, this is his main message in this speech to Congress, is that we need to attack Iran. We need to attack Iran. Iran is behind all the terrorism. So give us all the weapons, give us all the money, send your own military to Iran so we can fight in this massive regional war. Fight for Israel. Die for Israel. That's Netanyahu's whole message. And then Donald Trump is trumpeting. He's announcing to the world, if I die, then there needs to be war with Iran. So all of his supporters are seeing this. Who do you think is going to be incentivized to take the shot? Who's going to be incentivized to take the shot and make it look like it was Iran? So the people advising Trump, it's funny. It's funny how stupid this guy is. I also want to say, Netanyahu's statement about Iran exporting the revolution to the rest of the world. The actual context of that statement is that this is actually true, that Iran and Khomeini wanted to inspire Islamic revolutions in other countries. Not that Iran would come and start its own revolution, or Iran would come and try to take over all of these different countries. Iran wanted to inspire, in Egypt, for example, an Islamic revolution, in Saudi, an Islamic revolution, in Jordan, in Syria, whatever. Throw off the secular democracies or secular dictatorships, throw off the monarchies, these royal families, and have an Islamic government. Now, obviously, we know that this Shia understanding of government, or wilayat al-faqih of Khomeini, that's not Islamic. That is not an Islamic system. We know that. That's fine. But the point is that they wanted to inspire this kind of Islamic revival, political revival throughout the world. This was in 1979. That's what Khomeini was saying. Not like, oh, Iran is going to come and take over the entire world. But when you understand that context, you kind of understand why these Arab regimes are so anti-Iran. Part of it, obviously, is because they're puppets of Israel in the West. But another part of it is that they're royal families that they don't want to be overthrown. These are royal families. These are monarchies. They don't want to be overthrown. And the fact that it happened in Iran, they're worried that their own people are going to be inspired to do the same thing. And so they crack down. They crack down on Islamism. They crack down on the Muslim Brotherhood, the Ikhwan. They crack down on any potential, especially post-Arab Spring, because that was like, oh, it's actually happening. You know, it's actually happening. Our worst fears. And anyway, so that's why you see these madkhalis, these bootlickers are constantly agitating for war against Iran, and protesting is haram. Islamism, Islamic government is haram. We need to just obey the ruler, no matter if the ruler is an atheist, if he's secular, just obey. You know, that's where that ideology comes from. It's in part a counter-reaction to the revolution in Iran. So the madkhalis are basically getting their direction from Netanyahu directly. Like their lines, like the madkhali lines that you see posted in some of my comment sections, these electronic bots, they're getting their lines from Netanyahu.
That's why the mobs in Tehran chant death to Israel before they chant death to America. For Iran, Israel is first, America is next. So when Israel fights Hamas, we're fighting Iran. When we fight Hezbollah, we're fighting Iran. When we fight the Houthis, we're fighting Iran. And when we fight Iran, we're fighting the most radical and murderous enemy of the United States of America. And one more thing. When Israel acts...
Now Iran has the title. So the plan to attack and invade Iran, like have the U.S. invade Iran, this goes back to 2001. Right after 9/11, you have the U.S. military experts, these neocon Zionists like General Wesley Clark. He made that viral video, the infamous video. We have it posted actually on MuslimSkeptic channel, where General Wesley Clark says that, yeah, I overheard the orders, like right after 9/11, that we are going to attack 7 Muslim countries. And he listed them. Iraq, Syria, Libya, and Yemen, Afghanistan, and Iran. I don't know if that's 7. I forgot one. But Iran was the last one on the list. And the whole point is that they always had this agenda. I think they thought that they were going to attack Iran much earlier, much sooner, but it was eventually going to happen. And now it's all energy put into demonizing Iran, making Iran look like the biggest enemy of America. We need to invade. The U.S. needs to send all its resources, all its military to go and attack for Israel.
To prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons that could destroy Israel and threaten every American city, every city that you come from. We're not only protecting ourselves, we're protecting you. My friends,
we're protecting you. Israel is protecting America. So this is kind of schizophrenic. At first you say that America is the biggest power and is the mightiest force on earth, but then it has to be protected by this small country in the Middle East.
Remember one thing from the speech. Remember this. Our enemies are your enemies. Our fight is your fight. And our victory will be your victory.
Most people don't believe that. Most Americans, like, this kind of propaganda really doesn't ring true anymore. Like, why? Like, why are your enemies our enemies? Like, we don't have any problem with the Palestinians. We don't have any problem with Iran. We've seen what happened in Iraq. We've seen what happened in Afghanistan. We've seen what happened in Libya, in Yemen. Like, we don't have any problems with these people. Like, these wars are costing us money. I'm just trying to make rent. I'm just trying to live my life. I'm more worried about like what they're teaching my kids in school. Like right now, California passed new laws where the school can give children gender hormone therapy without actually informing the parents, without the parents' consent. I'm worried about what's happening to my neighborhood, what's happening to my family. I actually don't care about Iran. I don't think that Iran is pushing these kinds of social changes. I don't think Iran is pushing inflation in my country. I don't think that it's Iran that's imposing these kinds of economic policies where I can't even afford to live. I have to work multiple jobs just to meet my monthly costs. It's not really Iran. And this is why the military is having so much trouble recruiting in the West. They're trying to introduce a draft. This was actually considered within Congress that we need a mandatory draft. So it's no longer up to you if you want to join the U.S. military. That's how low our recruitment numbers are. We have to force people to join the military. Why? Because we want to go to war with Iran. Because that's what Netanyahu has ordered us to do, to go and fight in Iran. So unfortunately, you don't have the same zeal. You don't have the same energy like we did back in 2001 or 2003. Because of 9/11, people are just dying to go to Iran or to Iraq rather, and Afghanistan, and they're signing up because they want to defend democracy. Like, we don't have that same kind of energy in the population. So that makes me very suspicious that there is going to be some kind of false flag. There is going to be some kind of major event to spur this kind of sentiment. Like, oh, we're so outraged at Iran, I'm going to join the military. I think that's the only way that you can really generate the motivation from the population to support another war. The economic situation is much worse now in 2024 than it was in 2001 or in the early 2000s. Like, things are very bad economically. And I've written about this. I've spoken about this at length. So the U.S. can't really survive another war in the Middle East. But this is the nature, like the parasitic nature of Israel with America. It's killing the host. It's basically killing off the host. Just one last hurrah, one last war. Suck America dry, to squeeze out the last drop. Get rid of Iran, and then our overarching goals for greater Israel and a Middle East that's dominated by Israel, that will come to fruition, and then we can dispose of the U.S., the corpse that we've sucked dry, and we will have achieved our aims. Like, that's the way that they're thinking, and they realize that the U.S. is at the end of its time as a superpower. You have Russia ascendant, you have China. That's what's surprising about this speech, actually. He never mentions Russia and China, and I think that was deliberate. Doesn't want to muddy the water from his main goal, which is to incite the U.S. into war against Iran. But I think that there's going to be false flag shenanigans. That's my prediction. There needs to be something that gets people signed up for the Army, Navy, and Air Force, and Marines.
Ladies and gentlemen, that victory is in sight. Israel's defeat of Hamas will be a powerful blow to Iran's axis of terror. Another part of that axis, Hezbollah, attacked Israel on October 8th, a day after the Hamas attack.
Hamas.
It has launched thousands of missiles and drones against us. 80,000 of our citizens in northern Israel evacuated their homes, becoming effectively refugees in their own land.
Oh, so sad.
We are committed to returning them home. We prefer to achieve this diplomatically. But let me be clear. Israel will do whatever it must do to restore security to our northern border and return our people safely to their homes. Last Friday, a third Iranian proxy, the Houthis, attacked Tel Aviv with a deadly drone. It exploded a few hundred feet from the American consulate, killing one person and injuring 9. On Saturday, I authorized a swift response to that attack. All our enemies should know this. Those who attack Israel will pay a very heavy price. And as we defend ourselves on all fronts, I know that America has our back. And I thank you for it. All sides of the aisle. Thank you.
We'll see how long that lasts. We'll see how long, America lasts like this.
My friends, for decades, America has provided Israel with generous military assistance, and a grateful Israel has provided America with critical intelligence that saved many lives. We've jointly developed some of the most sophisticated weapons on earth. I choose my words carefully. We've jointly developed some of the most sophisticated weapons on earth.
Yeah, this is something threatening the entire world. We've developed some of the most sophisticated weapons. Get it? Get what I'm saying to you, rest of the world? So, Allahu Alam, what kind of weapons he's talking about. He's talking about certain kinds of AI weapons. Obviously, we know of the use of AI weapons against Palestinians, like the Lavender AI program. Does he mean kind of cyber weapons, cyber hacking weapons to cause damage to the internet security of the world? There's been claims that there is Israeli software that can be used to attack nuclear facilities, nuclear power plants, cause meltdowns. This was claimed about Japan's nuclear reactor meltdown in Fukushima. This is a kind of conspiracy theory that kind of meltdown was caused by a software failure that was created through hacking. Was Israel behind that? So these kinds of weapons, what are they that he's ominously mentioning? We've jointly developed them. So, or it could be just bluster because you have all of these weapons, but the Houthis are just sending $10,000 drones and hitting your capital. So maybe those weapons aren't as sophisticated as you want us to believe.
That help protect both our countries. And we also help keep American boots, we help keep Americans' boots off the ground while protecting our shared interests in the Middle East.
We prevent American boots from coming to the Middle East. What are you talking about? Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, all of these wars are at the behest of who? On the basis of whose intelligence? He's touting the intelligence information sharing between Israel and the U.S., but that intelligence has been so wrong over and over again. Our intelligence shows that Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. That intelligence came from who? That came from Israel. The Iraq War. So their intelligence is actually driving the U.S. to have boots on the ground. And that's what they want to do with Iran as well.
I deeply appreciate America's support, including in this current war. But this is an exceptional moment. Fast-tracking U.S. military aid can dramatically expedite an end to the war in Gaza and help prevent a broader war in the Middle East. In World War II, as Britain fought on the front lines of civilization, Winston Churchill appealed to Americans with these famous words: "Give us the tools and we'll finish the job." Today, as Israel fights on the front line of civilization, I too appeal to America. Give us the tools faster and we'll finish the job faster.
Yeah, there's never enough. The U.S. gives Israel about $4 billion, almost $4 billion in aid every year, free money, weapons as much as it wants, unconditional. Here, all these free weapons. We just take money from these taxpayers, from these, increasingly destitute and impoverished taxpayers, to yoink take the millions, take the billions from these taxpayers and straight into the coffers of Lockheed Martin and all of these weapons, Raytheon, all of these weapons manufacturers, to produce all these weapons of mass destruction for the Israeli terror state to kill Palestinian babies. Like that's the pipeline, taxpayer to dead baby pipeline. And it's not enough, give us the weapons faster, slave, hurry it up. Why am I waiting? I have to wait for my advanced weapon systems, my guided missiles. I have to wait. Why? Send me the free weapons now. Yesterday. Send them yesterday. I'm still waiting for my weapons. These babies aren't going to kill themselves. These Palestinian babies aren't going to kill themselves. This is the way that the entitlement that he has, just bossing around the allegedly most powerful people in the world. Allegedly, these congressmen are seated at the top of the superpower, at the helm of the superpower, at the wheel, but they're getting bossed around by the prime minister of this small Middle Eastern country. It's very interesting.
My dear friends, the war in Gaza could end tomorrow if Hamas surrenders, disarms, and returns all the hostages.
Hamas. So see, he contradicted himself. Remember earlier in the speech, he said, I'm committed to bring all the hostages home. Okay, you can bring all the hostages home because there's a ceasefire deal that the U.S. has brokered, and Hamas has already agreed to that ceasefire deal. But that's not enough for you. You want Hamas to be defeated, to surrender, to basically agree to be killed. That's what you want, which is never going to happen. So you're not committed to bring the hostages home.
If they don't, Israel will fight until we destroy Hamas's military capabilities, end its rule in Gaza, and bring all our hostages home. That's what total victory means, and we will settle for nothing less.
Now, total victory means forever war.
The day after we defeat Hamas, a new Gaza can emerge. My vision for that day is of a demilitarized and de-radicalized Gaza. Israel does not seek to resettle Gaza, but for the foreseeable future, we must retain overriding security control there to prevent the resurgence of terror, to ensure that Gaza never again poses a threat to Israel.
Yeah, lie. They are planning to resettle. And Jared Kushner made statements about resettling Gaza. All of these settlers within Israel are celebrating because they want to return back to Gaza. They were there before the IDF pulled them out, the Israeli settlers out of Gaza, before imposing a siege on Gaza in 2006. So they want to return. They want to return back to Gaza. They're celebrating. You have auctions happening for land in Gaza by Israelis, by Zionists, and Jews in the U.S., happening at U.S. synagogues. So this is a complete and blatant lie.
Gaza should have a civilian administration run by Palestinians who do not seek to destroy Israel. That's not too much to ask. It's a fundamental thing that we have a right to demand and to receive.
Yeah, so this is apparently his plan for Gaza, is that, we're going to have a de-radicalized and militarized civilian government. Yeah, that's not a government. This is just administrators from Zionist administrators who determine everything for a occupied population. So that's the status quo, basically. The status quo, and every few years you bomb them, you mow the lawn, mow the grass, as the Israeli generals put it, to slowly cull the Palestinian population and bring them further and further into poverty so that they won't be able to live. And that's already the case. How is there going to be a civilian population in Gaza when the entire strip has been demolished? It's all rubble. How are you going to live there? You've created an impossible situation, and then you're going to pretend there can be a civilian government where the Palestinians will be able to live in Gaza with a civilian government. This is all nonsense. You've made the strip unlivable so that you can resettle it. That's your whole plan. And now you want to do the same thing to the West Bank. The West Bank also is being taken over even more aggressively since October 7th. They're just taking more and more of the land in the West Bank because they want the entire territory of Israel, or all the Palestinian occupied territories, to be liquidated of Palestinians and repurposed for settlers, Israeli settlers. That's the whole goal. They want more and more land, and now they're going after southern Lebanon. Southern Lebanon is next on the list. That's the next phase.
A new generation of Palestinians must no longer be taught to hate Jews, but rather to live in peace with us. Those twin words, demilitarization and de-radicalization, those two concepts were applied to Germany and Japan after World War II, and that led to decades of peace, prosperity, and security. Following our victory, with the help of regional partners, the demilitarization and de-radicalization of Gaza can also lead to a future of security, prosperity, and peace. That's my vision for Gaza.
Yeah, so he's saying that, well, Germany and Japan after World War II, they were demilitarized and they were de-radicalized, and now they're living such prosperous, wonderful lives and are these prosperous nations. But he's leaving out like a major part of history. Japan, first of all, had to be nuked twice, 2 atomic bombs dropped on Japan to thoroughly to traumatize and wipe out entire cities. This is Japan. And then Germany. So Germany as well, after World War II, there was a genocide directed at Germans, any German speaker in Eastern Europe. They were transferred as refugees, displaced, or they were killed. And the amount of deaths of Germans genocided after World War II, like this is what they don't teach in a lot of Western history. The low estimate, 500,000, but up to 2.5 million Germans were killed after World War II. These are civilians. Over 12 to 14.6 million Germans were displaced. And you had, some estimates are more like 9 million killed. Candace Owens was saying 12 million. 12 million, and she tweeted this documentary from the BBC about the genocide of Germans within Europe after World War II. So this is how Germany was de-radicalized. This is how they were demilitarized, through genocide. Systematic genocide coordinated by Winston Churchill, or the West basically, and the USSR, the Soviets. They coordinated a mass displacement and genocide of the German people, and this is how they this is in the aftermath of World War II in order to demilitarize and de-radicalize. This is what they want to do to Palestinians. They want to genocide as many as possible in order to de-radicalize them. That is their whole strategy. It's the same strategy that was taken against Algeria in the 19th century and the early 20th century. You de-radicalize Algerians, these fundamentalist Muslim Algerians, by genociding them, by killing 7 million of them. So, and earlier in the speech, he was saying that, the Holocaust, the worst genocide in history. Who said that? Like, who agrees that the Holocaust is the worst genocide? Like, okay, we're supposed to accept that the genocide of 2.5 million to potentially 9 million Germans, who cares, right? They're not as important as the Jews that were killed in the Holocaust. Or what about the 12 million to potentially 100 million Native Americans that were genocided in the past 300 years since the founding, or since British colonialism and French colonialism in North America? And that's not important. That's not the biggest genocide. That's not the most significant genocide. The Holocaust trumps even that. What about the genocide of Algerians? What about the genocide of the Bengalis and the South Asians by the British by the British colonial powers. Is that not a bad genocide? It doesn't match the Holocaust that we all should see as the worst genocide in history. Isn't this just openly, blatantly racist? Blatantly racist and blatantly supremacist. Like the genocide of one particular race is just more significant, it's more important, it's more tragic than the genocide of your people, the genocide of brown people, the genocide of whites or Arabs or Africans. What about the Congolese genocide? Also over 10 million. The Congolese genocide by the Belgians. What about, anyway, we can list so many genocides, but there's only one genocide that we should see as the most important and the most significant. For some reason, according to Benjamin Netanyahu, and the Congress applauds that and gives him a standing ovation for that open racism.
Now, here's my vision for the broader Middle East. It's also shaped in part by what we saw in the aftermath of World War II. After that war, America forged a security alliance in Europe to counter the growing Soviet threat. Likewise, America and Israel today can forge a security alliance in the Middle East to counter the growing Iranian threat. All countries that are at peace with Israel and all those countries who will make peace with Israel should be invited to join this alliance.
Yeah, so he's comparing the Soviet threat with an Iranian threat. Like the Soviet Union was this superpower with nuclear weapons, with intercontinental ballistic missiles, with, this kind of massive influence. And yeah, okay, that is a threat, the Soviet threat across the entire globe. The Soviet Union also engaged in all kinds of genocide and mass murder, and they deliberately were trying to spark communist revolution throughout the rest of the world. They literally had this influence over Cuba, and there was this Cuban Missile Crisis, which some have claimed was just a bluff this whole time. But the Soviets had that kind of power to influence a country very close to the U.S. to potentially have nuclear weapons aimed at U.S. cities. Iran doesn't have anything like that. Iran is not a superpower. Iran doesn't have intercontinental ballistic missiles. Iran doesn't even have nuclear weapons yet. Iran doesn't have those kinds of capabilities that the Soviet Union had. But so this is a bizarre analogy or comparison between Iran and the Soviet Union.
We saw a glimpse of that potential alliance on April 14th. Led by the United States, more than half a dozen nations worked alongside Israel to help neutralize hundreds of missiles and drones launched by Iran against us. Thank you, President Biden, for bringing that coalition together.
Yeah, so he's talking about Jordan and Saudi, and what other countries, like what other traders were helping Israel.
The new alliance I envision would be a natural extension of the groundbreaking Abraham Accords. Those accords saw peace forged between Israel and 4 Arab countries, and they were supported by Republicans and Democrats alike. I have a name for this new alliance. I think we should call it the Abraham Alliance.
Madkhalis are getting their new instructions. Madkhalis are getting the bootlickers are getting their new instructions straight from Tel Aviv. The Abraham Alliance. Not only because we already got the previous Madkhali message was that, there's no problem with Muslim countries allying with Jewish nations and Christian nations. There's no problem to ally. This is perfectly permissible. It's halal. The Prophet ﷺ had these kinds of agreements, right? That was the line from Rabbi Ferris, from these Madkhali bootlickers, from Shamsi, and they twisted. Obviously, yeah, you can have Muslims can have alliances, but not with countries that are actively genociding a Muslim population. Just blatantly killing tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of Muslims, and are involved in all kinds of terrorism against Muslims around the world. You can't ally with them. You can't ally with them and sell out the ummah for the sake of your economic trade partnership. But now they're going to have new instructions. Not only can you ally and have economic ties with these nations, with Israel, that's perfectly halal, but even a defensive agreement. Muslims can join their military. Muslims can join the Israeli military or be involved in this kind of direct collaboration between the Israeli military and Saudi military, UAE military, Jordan's military. No problem. This is perfectly halal. They'll have to really start thinking creatively. Maybe they've already started. Rabbi Ferris is, they're looking up some references. Oh, can we find any example of the Sahaba fighting hand in hand with the Jews? Maybe Banu Qurayza. Maybe one of these Jewish tribes, the Sahaba, are fighting hand in hand. Let's find those hadith. Let's see if that ever happened. Like, this is the way that their Islamic research, their dawah is all about. The Madkhali dawah. The S-Pub's dawah. This is what they're busy working on now, they got their orders from Bibi, from Tel Aviv, so now they have to find the hadith. They have to make the Islamic argument. So the big shuyukh, the Saudi shuyukh can give their fatwa about, this is perfectly defensive alliance. Whoever speaks against our defensive alliance and criticizes the ruler for this defensive alliance with Israel, they're Kharijis. They are Khariji terrorists. They're the dogs of hellfire. These terrorists, we should assassinate them because they're Khariji. That's what Islam says. That's the Sunnah. Muslim Sayan has a good word. Talmud Khalis. That's a good word. Talmud Khalis.
I want to thank President Trump for his leadership in brokering the historic Abraham Accords. Like Americans, Israelis were relieved that President Trump emerged safe and sound from that dastardly attack on him, dastardly attack on American democracy. There is no room for political violence in democracies. My dear friends, Democrats and Republicans, despite these times of upheaval, I'm hopeful about the future. I'm hopeful about Israel because my people, the Jewish people, emerged from the depths of hell. I'm hopeful about Israel because my people, the Jewish people, emerged from the depths of hell.
Whoa. What did he just say? That sounded quite anti-Semitic.
Because my people, the Jewish people, emerged from the depths of hell.
What? Wow. Saying it like it is. Telling it like it is, huh? Netanyahu, that's anti-Semitism. ADL, please. ADL has, entries about, Islamic fundamentalism, Islamism. If you're a Muslim and you want Islamic government, that's a form of hate and extremism, and the ADL is going to brand you as a threat to democracy. If you're Christian and you want Christian government, that makes you a Christian nationalist. You are a threat. You are a hateful extremist. But if you're Jewish and you want Jewish government, there's no entry in the ADL for that, huh? That's interesting. That's an interesting omission. If you want Muslim governance, extremism. Christian governance, extremism. But Jewish governments, that's fine. Oh, no problem with that. Zionism is not extremism. Zionism is beautiful. Wow. That's interesting, ADL, how you have that kind of standard for Christians and Muslims, but you don't extend it to Jews. I thought ADL was against all hate and all fundamentalism. Wow. I guess it's okay for Israel to have a Jewish state, huh? So
I'm hopeful about Israel because my people, the Jewish people, emerged from the depths of hell.
Anyway, it's a joke. He continues.
From dispossession and genocide. And against all odds,
it's still funny.
We restored our sovereignty in our ancient homeland. We built a powerful and vibrant democracy, a democracy that pushes the boundaries of innovation for the betterment of all humanity.
The betterment of all humanity with an apartheid state.
I'm hopeful about America because I'm hopeful about Americans. I know how much the people of this country have sacrificed to defend freedom. America will continue to be a force for light and good in a dark and dangerous world. For free peoples everywhere, America remains the beacon of liberty its extraordinary founders envisioned back in 1776.
Yeah, America unfortunately represents terror, represents genocide, represents mass brutality, represents regime change, represents economic war. This is what America represents for the entire world. That's why when America is losing influence and is suffering economically, the entire world celebrates. That's the legacy of America, is the biggest terror state in history. When we count up all the bodies, I think America will be at the top of the list in terms of people killed, innocent people killed. Maybe the Soviet Union also is up there. Maybe China historically, but the U.S. That's the legacy, not as a beacon of hope, more like a nightmare. Just this never-ending nightmare. And we're just all waiting for it to end. We're waiting for the death and destruction and the terrorism to end. Look at what's happening in Palestine. Look at 200,000 have been consigned to death at the hands of Israel, the terror state. But who's funding the terror state? Who's facilitating the terror state to continue to wipe out innocent children? Look at the maimed babies that we're seeing every day coming out of Palestine. Who has co-signed that massacre, those daily massacres, this torture of children? Like, this is the legacy of the United States, and we should never forget that.
Working together, I'm confident that our two nations will vanquish the tyrants and terrorists who threaten us both. As Israel's Prime Minister, I promise you this: no matter how long it takes, no matter how difficult the road ahead, Israel will not relent. Israel will not bend. We will defend our land. We will defend our people. We will fight until we achieve victory. Victory over liberty, rather victory of liberty over tyranny, victory of life over death, victory of good over evil. That's our solemn commitment.
Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so this verse comes to mind. Actually, my wife and son told me about this ayah that they thought is relevant. So this ayah from Surah Al-Ghafir, and when the 40th surah, verse 25, and when he brought them the truth from us, meaning this is referring to Musa alayhi salam, Moses, and when he brought them the truth from us, from Allah, they said, Pharaoh's people said, kill the sons of those who have believed with him and keep their women alive. So kill their children. But the plan of the disbelievers is not except in error. And Fir'aun said, let me kill Moses and let him call upon his Lord. Indeed, I fear that he will change your religion, or that he will cause corruption in the land. Fasad. So the irony. Fir'aun is calling for killing the children and sparing women, basically. But he's accusing Moses of fasad. This is exactly like what we see from these Yahud, from Netanyahu and the rest, these Zionists. They're killing, and then they're claiming, oh, we're just so worried about fasad. We're so worried about corruption and killing and terrorism. Yet they're the ones who are doing the killing. They're doing the terrorism. They're doing the ethnic cleansing. They're killing the babies right and left with no regard and making jokes about it and posing with their bikes, sleeping in their cribs. So this kind of inversion of evil, this satanic version, this is demonstrated by Fir'aun. And it's pharaonic, this kind of Satanism is pharaonic, and that's why we see it repeated. Even word for word, even in the same kind of language, we see the pharaohs of today are repeating the language of the pharaohs of the past. And the believers, like Musa alayhi salam, like the prophet Moses, they stand against the Fir'aun, and they bring the truth, they speak the truth, and they bear the atrocities, knowing that their consequences are with Allah and all power is with Allah, and He's going to bring justice and revenge against these who kill and they maim and they genocide. They're going to face a gruesome end in the akhirah, a gruesome torment in the hereafter. So this verse is, subhanAllah, again, very important for us to read and reflect. So that was the speech.
And we will continue to work with the United States and our Arab partners
I thought it was the end.
to transform a troubled region from a backwater of repression, poverty, and war into a thriving oasis of dignity, prosperity, and peace. In this noble mission, as in many others, Israel will always remain America's indispensable ally. Through
Puppy dog.
through thick and thin, in good times and in bad, Israel will always be your loyal friend and your steadfast partner. On behalf of the people of Israel,
as long as the U.S. keeps writing the checks. But if you delay the weapons, then we're no longer your friend. Even if you have you're giving us all the weapons that we want for free, but if you delay it by a day, then we're not friends anymore. And I'm going to come to Congress and yell at you, basically, and tell you to send them faster, send the weapons faster. Yeah, once the U.S. is finished economically, then you think Israel is going to care about the U.S.?
I came here today to say thank you, America. Thank you for your support and solidarity. Thank you for standing in Israel, with Israel, in our hour of need. Together we shall defend our common civilization. Together we shall secure a brilliant future for both our nations. May God bless Israel, may God bless America, and may God bless the great alliance between Israel and America forever.
Yeah, so the news coverage, that was a speech, but the news coverage doesn't really talk about this speech by Netanyahu. There wasn't much mainstream news coverage. There was some, but they didn't really focus on it. Why? Because if they show the American people how their Congress is like giving a record number of standing ovations to this guy, it's going to raise eyebrows. It's going to make Americans start questioning, like, why are we giving this much respect? Like, who is this guy? Why are these senators and congressmen acting like puppy dogs for him? Like, this is humiliating. Is this a humiliation ritual that we have to endure through? Where this guy comes and disrespects us. He says that we suffered like 20 of your 9/11s, like your national tragedy, like the biggest national tragedy, 9/11 that your country has faced. We had 20 of those. So don't talk to like that kind of condescending attitude and then demanding weapons for free, expedite them. Like that, if like the broader public sees this, they're going to be scandalized by it and they're going to be angry and upset. So the news coverage didn't really cover this speech to the extent and showing like all the standing ovations and everything, because they know it's giving a bad message, a bad image. It's bad optics for Israel. It's bad optics for this corrupt government in the U.S. and Washington, D.C. Instead, they focused on the protests that were happening, the supposed protests, and one incident like the flag burning. This is the flag burning supposedly by pro-Palestinian protesters. Let's look at this footage and see if you can see anything, if something seems off to you about this.
Need civilization. God bless.
Did you really hear? Maybe you missed it. They were saying Allahu Akbar. So first there's chanting Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, and then there's chanting burn that shit, burn that shit, burn that. Like, is that like a Muslim chant? Like, do Muslims say Allahu Akbar and then burn that like expletive, burn that expletive. That doesn't sound like Muslims, let alone Palestinians. So what is this? So this is what the media focused on. Like, oh, look at these. And it just happens to coincide with what Netanyahu said about the protests. They're anti-American. They're anti-American. That's why you have to be against these protesters.
Burn that shit! 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 Alive! Burn that shit! Burn that shit!
Yeah, it looks like there are more people with cameras. Look at all, like almost everyone standing around has like a professional camera. So, or like is recording this, as opposed to like an organic protest with people. So this, I think, is just a photo op. Seems like it's very fishy, like who's actually burning the flag like this. And then they defaced some of the monuments and wrote like Hamas on the monuments and Free Palestine on some of these Washington monuments. These kinds of displays, I think, are actually coming from Zionists. Like Zionists are doing this to agitate the American population against the Palestinian cause. And it's so transparent and so obvious to see. And people are noting it. Like, Allahu Akbar. Like who are the Muslims here that are chanting Allahu Akbar? I see just a bunch of masked people like wearing masks and cameras. Yeah. So then, all of the Zionist commenters on Twitter are saying, the flag-burning terrorists supporting anti-Israel protesters are proving Netanyahu right. Wow, what a coincidence. They're proving him right exactly at the same time as his speech. They're demonstrating exactly what he warned us about. Wow. What a coincidence. And then people are like, this is Cenk saying, spray painting Hamas on a statue and burning the U.S. flag is so unbelievably stupid and damaging to the cause of protecting Palestinian lives that if it isn't a psyop from Mossad, then they have to be wondering how they got this lucky. Americans are on your side, don't squander it. Yeah, like other kinds of protests where they were disrupting church services, or they're burning American flags, or they're saying death to America. Like, this is clearly a psyop. This is meant to generate hatred and turn the American people away from the Palestinian cause. So even Cenk, who is on the left, notices it. So what about the Democrats? So the Democrats weren't at this speech. They were either boycotting it or they didn't show up. And you have Nancy Pelosi, the former Speaker of the House, saying Benjamin Netanyahu's presentation in the House chamber today was by far the worst presentation of any foreign dignitary invited and honored with the privilege of addressing the Congress of the U.S. Many of us who love Israel spent time today listening to Israeli citizens whose families have suffered in the wake of October 7th, Hamas terror attack and kidnappings. These families are asking for a ceasefire deal that will bring the hostages home, and we hope the Prime Minister would spend his time achieving that goal. Oh, so I guess the left-wing Democrats are pro-Palestinian, right? No, like this is, you have to understand, like within Israeli politics, there's also a left wing and a right wing. They're both, as I mentioned earlier in the stream, they're both Zionists. They both want to snuff out the Palestinians. They just have different timeline for that. The right wing wants to snuff them out now. The left wing wants to snuff them out, over the long term by liberalizing the Palestinians and basically turning all of Palestine into like Nas Daily. Do you see the reaction that I did to Nas Daily, Nusayr Yassin? Like, they want all Palestinians to be like Nas Daily, where Nas says, I'm first an Israeli citizen and then I'm Palestinian second. That's what the left wing wants for Palestine. So that's the ikhtilaf. That's the extent of it. But you have the left wing within Israel who are anti-Netanyahu. They're more secular. They're more liberal. They don't agree with the Likud party. That's the right-wing party. And they want Netanyahu out. They don't want this coalition with Ben Gvir's party either. And so they're trying to pressure Netanyahu out. And that's why they want a ceasefire. So their allies in the U.S. are the Democrats. And so the Democrats are also trying to pressure Netanyahu, not because they care about Palestinians, not because they want to impose any kind of meaningful restriction on weapons, free weapons to Israel, only because they don't want Netanyahu to be in charge of the genocide. They want some left-wing person in charge of the genocide. That's the extent of the disagreement. And it goes, to actual demographics of Israel. Israel is about 50% Mizrahi Jew and about 50% or 45% Ashkenazi Jew. And the majority of Jews in America are Ashkenazi, and they tend to be more left-wing. They tend to be more liberal. They don't necessarily like Netanyahu. They're the diaspora, and what Netanyahu is doing in this kind of in-your-face ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians, that puts a lot of negative attention on Jews. It puts negative attention on Zionists, and they don't like that. They don't want that. They don't want to be seen as this kind of supporters of genocide. So they don't want Netanyahu. They want someone to genocide Palestinians, but can you do it in a more optical way? Can you do it with more, concern for the optics of the situation? Like, we're fine with you ethnically cleansing them, but we don't want the ICC, the International Criminal Court, to make rulings against us. That really destroys our case. And Netanyahu is like the bulldozer. He's like a bull in a china shop. He's being pushed by the far right, by the Ben Gvir faction, to go harder and harder and expand the war, get into southern Lebanon, get into Iran. The left wing doesn't want this. It's like, can we take our time, please? Can we just take it step by step? Maybe in 50 years, maybe in a generation, we can, finally defeat Iran. Not today. We don't need to do it today. Like, now, you're threatening the state. You're threatening the existence of Israel with this kind of unfettered belligerence. That's what the left wing is worried about. This is what the diaspora is worried about. The more liberal Jews are worried about. So this is what is creating this dynamic of Nancy Pelosi coming out and saying, oh, Netanyahu's speech was the worst given by any foreign dignitary to Congress. So don't be fooled. There is no pro-Palestinian member of the Democratic establishment. You also had Kamala Harris. So Kamala met with Netanyahu yesterday, and she came out with this statement. She also condemned the flag burning. Interesting that this random flag burning of this random protesters burning the flag, and you have 50 cameras from all the mainstream news are recording it in ultra high definition. And the same day, Kamala is denouncing it, and all of these major politicians are denouncing. Wow, what are the odds? What are the chances? So here's Kamala.
I had a frank and constructive meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu. I told him that I will always ensure that Israel is able to defend itself, including from Iran and Iran-backed militias such as Hamas and Hezbollah. From when I was a young girl, collecting funds to plant trees for Israel, to my time in the United States Senate and now at the White House, I have had an unwavering commitment to the existence of the State of Israel, to its security, and to the people of Israel. I've said it many times.
Yeah, so that's like the standard Democratic position. Like, we're committed to the security of Israel and giving it everything it wants for free.
But it bears repeating. Israel has a right to defend itself, and how it does so matters. Hamas is a brutal terrorist organization. On October 7, Hamas triggered this war when it massacred 1,200 innocent people, including 44 Americans. Hamas has committed horrific acts of sexual violence and took 250 hostages. There are American citizens who remain captive in Gaza.
Yeah, so she repeating like the claims of Hamas committing mass sexual violence. This has been debunked. Even the Times, it doesn't get more mainstream than the Times has reported on this. Israel says Hamas weaponized rape. Does the evidence add up? The Israeli government insists that Hamas formally sanctioned sexual assault on October 7th, but investigators say the evidence does not stand up to scrutiny. Catherine Phillip and Gabriel Weiniger report on 8 months of claim and counterclaim. So you can go read this article. It's still very pro-Zionist, but they reveal that, look, there's not really evidence of this mass rape on October 7th that was used by Hamas. There's no evidence that has been provided by the government. So these are some screenshots from the article. The political establishment has opened a fresh battle with the UN over what the Patton report didn't say. So there's this UN report, it's called the Patton Report, on the supposed sexual violence that happened on October 7th. Sexual violence was beyond reasonable doubt, systematic, widespread, and ordered and perpetrated by Hamas. That's the claim from the Israeli government and all of these Zionists, that Hamas has used the systematic, widespread rape that was ordered from the top of Hamas authorities. But the UN, the Patton Report, does not actually show this. It does not substantiate this. And so that's caused some political tension. On November 14th, the police held their first press conference for the international media on their investigation into sexual assault. Despite promising new evidence on its systematic nature, none was provided. To this date, police have not interviewed a single survivor because they can't find any. On January 4th, the police put out a fresh appeal for witnesses saying they had succeeded in interviewing just 3 and had been unable to match their accounts with the bodies collected from the massacre site. So there's no evidence of any kind of, any forensic evidence. There's not any actual eyewitness testimony. All the eyewitness testimony that has come forward has been debunked by comparing their testimony to the actual massacre site. They're claiming that rapes happen where there's no body, there's nothing that shows this. There's no video footage of it. So this has, debunked, this is the debunking of the claim by the Israeli government and the Zionists. What the report did not say was whether sexual violence was part of the battle plan, nor did it name Hamas given the chaotic array of actors that day. So this is something that they even claimed that there was a woman who was pregnant who was raped and killed. No evidence of this. There's no body that matches this description. So this has been debunked as a hoax. The report also confirmed Israeli authorities were unable to provide much of the evidence that political leaders had insisted existed. In all the Hamas video footage Patton's team had watched and all the photographs they had seen, there were no depictions of rape. So there's no video evidence. There's no photographic evidence. We hired a leading Israeli dark web researcher to look for evidence for those images, including footage deleted from public sources. None could be found. So all of these Zionists online especially are constantly claiming that, we have the footage. We can't show the public. It's too graphic, but it exists. These so-and-so celebrity watched it in a private screening. We're showing it to Hollywood. We're showing it to politicians, a private screening, but it's so horrific. This Hamas attack was so horrific that we can't show it, but it has all the evidence. Trust us, trust us, trust us. But the UN says, no, there is no footage. And the Times says, no, there is no footage. We had a forensic researcher, a leading Israeli researcher, to look for the images. He can't find it. They can't even find it on the dark web. So this is a complete hoax. And then this is another article. So that's the Times article. The Intercept also reported on this, and it's called Between the Hammer and the Anvil, the story behind the New York Times October 7th expose. Screams without words is the New York Times published in this Israeli propaganda piece claiming, there was mass sexual violence. That was all completely debunked, and the Intercept is doing the debunking. And I highly recommend you read this article as well, because it shows how deceptive and duplicitous the lies and the hoax that they're spreading to demonize Arabs, to demonize Palestinians, to demonize Muslims as, these savage beasts that are just mass raping women and children. But it's all based on lies. A racist lie. And this was in the Times of Israel, published a month after October 7th, where even the Times of Israel had admitted at that point, and I pointed it out back then, 8 months ago, amid war and urgent need to ID bodies, evidence of Hamas's October 7 rapes slips away. The evidence, it just slipped away. We had the evidence, but it slipped away. Despite definitive witness testimony, global skepticism persists about the terrorist sexual crimes. Times of Israel investigates how a mass casualty event in a war zone made forensic determination impossible. Oh, it's impossible to have evidence of these mass rapes that happened. We know it happened. We're telling you that it happened. We just don't have a shred of evidence. We don't have a shred of evidence. There's no photographics evidence. There's no video evidence. But I'm telling you, it happened. Just trust us. Trust me, bro. Trust me, bro. It happened. Why would we lie? We don't have any reason to lie about this. Trust us. Don't ask for evidence. That's anti-Semitic. If you don't trust me, that's anti-Semitic. Are you an anti-Semite asking to see evidence of these claims that justify our brutal bombing of Palestinian women and children, blowing up babies? You're asking for evidence? That's anti-Semitism, bro. Okay, so continuing with whatever else Kamala is about to say.
Also expressed with the Prime Minister my serious concern about the scale of human suffering in Gaza, including the death of far too many innocent civilians. And I made clear my serious concern about the dire humanitarian situation there, with over 2 million people facing high levels of food insecurity, and 500,000 people facing catastrophic levels of acute food insecurity. What has happened in Gaza over the past 9 months is devastating. The images of dead children and desperate, hungry people fleeing for safety, sometimes displaced for the second, third, or fourth time. We cannot look away in the face of these tragedies. We cannot allow ourselves to become numb to the suffering, and I will not be silent. Thanks to the leadership of our President, Joe Biden.
Yeah, so that's a lot that she said. She's saying a lot more than what Biden has ever said. She's talking about children. She's talking about deaths of these Palestinian civilians. She's talking about starvation. She's talking about displacement, like multiple displacements. So this is way more than what Biden has ever said. It's way more than Trump has ever said or any of these Republicans. So this is actually interesting. This is a surprise that she would make this kind of strong statement. And it's like a slap in the face to Netanyahu, even though they're still saying, oh, we'll give you all the weapons that you need to continue this genocide, to continue to starve the Palestinians. But we're just noting that we don't like it. We don't like what's happening, and we won't be silent about it. So, I mean, that's better than nothing, I guess. That's better than nothing. And so, you know, we have to ask the question, like, what's better for Muslims in the world? Is it Trump or is it Kamala? If Kamala ends up being the nominee, it seems like Kamala is going to be less of an ally to Israel. Still going to be a strong Zionist ally, but just less. And there's going to be like more of this tension between the left wing and Netanyahu. And that tension means less death for Palestinians. It could be a lot worse. Hard to imagine how things can be worse than they are now. 200,000 Palestinians murdered. How could it be much worse than it is now? But it could be worse because the Republicans, they're just signaling that they want to give Israel everything that it wants. Not only Trump was saying, oh yeah, we need to finish the job. Just finish the job in Palestine. Just wipe them out. Wipe Iran off the map. You know, if anything ever happens to me, wipe Iran off the map. His vice presidential pick, J.D. Vance, married to a Hindu woman, he's constantly talking. The first thing that he was saying when he got the announcement that he's Trump's VP is that, yeah, we need to attack Iran. We need to teach Iran a lesson. He's already like signaling how much pro-war with Iran he is. That's exactly what Israel wants. So the Republicans are signaling, and maybe that's the reason that Trump is even in the conversation for being president. Maybe they made a deal. Maybe Trump made a deal. Look, I'll just be the lapdog of Israel, even more than I was in 2016 and 2017, my first term. I'll be even more of a lapdog, more of a gift horse for Israel. Just give me a chance, another chance at the helm in the big boss chair of the White House. Maybe that's the deal that he made. Because whoever thought, like, before this assassination attempt against Trump, I didn't think that he would have any opportunity to run again. Okay, they're trying to put him in prison. They've already convicted him. Like, they're not going to let him run. That was the default position. I thought that more than likely he won't get a chance to run. And even if he did run, he probably is not going to win. He didn't win in 2020. Now it's even less likely that he's going to win. But then suddenly there's this assassination attempt. And now he's the presumptive winner. He's the presumptive winner of the 2024 election. How did this happen overnight? His whole base has been energized. I think it might have to do with a deal that he's made. He's already getting, all this money. Miriam Adelson, the Zionist wife of Sheldon Adelson, who gave Trump millions of dollars in 2016, and Trump rewarded that, or he paid back Adelson by moving the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, among other things. This is bad indication that Trump is fully bought out by the Israeli lobby, even more, if you can imagine it, than the Democrats, even more than Kamala Harris. I don't know. I don't like Kamala Harris, obviously. I don't like Trump. But for those who want to make what is the worst of the two evils, or what is the best of the two evils, maybe there's a case to be made for Kamala being the lesser of two evils. It's hard to say. There is also the other aspect that Trump doesn't really like Netanyahu. They've had tension in the past because Netanyahu was the first international leader to congratulate Biden on the 2020 election. And Trump was contesting the election. He's saying that the election was stolen. And before that gets settled, Biden announces congratulations, or Netanyahu announces congratulations to Biden. Trump took great offense to that. And he felt that Netanyahu stabbed him in the back. So, Trump doesn't easily forget those kinds of treacherous moves. He never forgets a traitor. So that adds a wrinkle to the equation. But, I never heard Trump say anything this strong that Kamala has just said, that we will not be silent in the face of Palestinians being killed, women and children being killed and being starved and being displaced. So I'm not encouraging you to vote. Do not vote. It doesn't matter. Do not sign your name to whatever bloodbath they're planning, whether it's a Democrat in office or a Republican. They're going to commit crimes against Muslims. You don't want your signature on that. You don't want to be tied to that in any way. Just absolve yourself from any responsibility. Don't vote. But, who in your analysis is going to be the lesser of two evils? I don't know. But there are some indications that maybe it's Kamala. Maybe it's the Democrats. Allahu Alam.
There is a deal on the table for a ceasefire and a hostage deal. And it is important that we recall what the deal involves. The first phase of the deal would bring about a full ceasefire, including a withdrawal of the Israeli military from population centers in Gaza. In the second phase, the Israeli military would withdraw from Gaza entirely, and it would lead to a permanent end to the hostilities. It is time for this war to end.
Yeah, so she's saying the time for the war to end, agree to the ceasefire, a permanent ceasefire. Hamas has already agreed to it. They're going to return all the hostages. It's just Netanyahu and the Likud party, the right wing in Israel and Israeli society overall, that doesn't want this ceasefire, that doesn't want the war to end. In fact, they want to expand the war. They want to go into southern Lebanon. They want to fight Hezbollah. They did an airstrike against the Houthis in Yemen, and they want the U.S. to go to war with Iran. But what Kamala is signaling is that we don't want this kind of war. We don't want this belligerence. We don't want to expand the war. And that's why they're delaying the weapons. The weapons delay, it's on the presumption that, they're delaying weapons because they're so concerned about the babies, the Palestinian babies. In reality, they're delaying the weapons because they don't want Israel to start escalating. They don't want Israel to start escalating in a way that will force the U.S. to enter the war, because they can't take another war. They can't take another front. Already the situation in Ukraine is spiraling. It's coming to an end. And Russia has won. NATO has lost. And we don't need another war. This is the Democratic position. The Republicans are signaling the opposite, that no, we want to give them everything that they want. We need to expand the war. Iran is a problem. Iran is this great evil terrorist state that is going to impose radical Islam on us all. So this is the messaging coming from the Republicans. So maybe, imagine that kind of war. What kind of death and destruction is going to come to the entire Middle East, not just in Iran, and not just in Iran, not just in Lebanon. It's going to affect the entire Muslim world. It's going to have ramifications for the entire ummah outside of the Middle East as well. And I can't even imagine the kind of surveillance state imposition that they're going to put in order to stifle any kind of opposition to this war. They might impose a mandatory draft. So many Muslims in the West, you might be forced to join war. Your children will be forced to join the war and be sent to fight for the U.S. in a mandatory draft unless you dodge the draft, in which case you will be sentenced to prison time. This is what happened in the Vietnam War and the U.S. history. So the implications are massive, for another war, because Iran is not like Iraq. Iran is not like Iraq. It will be, this massive war that could spiral into a World War III situation, because you also have China, you also have Russia that are involved. So Kamala is saying, we're not interested in that. We're not interested in that. And Biden has been saying it by delaying the weapons shipments. And Trump and J.D. Vance, his vice president, have been signaling the opposite.
And end in a way where Israel is secure, all the hostages are released, the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can exercise their right to freedom, dignity, and self-determination. There has been hopeful movement in the talks to secure an agreement on this deal. And as I just told Prime Minister Netanyahu, it is time to get this deal done. So
Netanyahu doesn't want this deal done. He wants to continue, and he keeps saying it. We have to meet all our objectives, and our objectives are to defeat Hamas and defeat Iran. So he's not going to cease fire.
Everyone who has been calling for a ceasefire, and to everyone who yearns for peace, I see you and I hear you. Let's get the deal done so we can get a ceasefire to end the war. Let's bring the hostages home, and let's provide much-needed relief to the Palestinian people. And ultimately, I remain committed to a path forward that can lead to a two-state solution. And I know right now it is hard to conceive of that prospect, but a two-state solution is the only path that ensures Israel remains a secure, Jewish, and democratic state, and one that
secure, Jewish, democratic. Yeah, you're a democratic, but you're an ethno-state. You're like a Jewish ethno-state. That really makes a lot of sense.
Ensures Palestinians can finally realize the freedom, security, and prosperity that they rightly deserve.
So that's Kamala. And then there's this new piece of information that came out today. FBI director questions whether Trump was hit by bullet or shrapnel in shooting. Ronnie Jackson, former White House doctor who examined Trump after shooting, pushes back it was a bullet. But the FBI director is saying it could have been shrapnel. So what does this mean? It means that, well, if the bullet hits Trump's ear, it's seems very plausible that they're aiming for the head and they just missed. So this was a genuine attempt to kill Trump. But who is motivated to genuinely kill Trump? That was the question that we were stuck in. If you remember the previous live stream, there were 2 live streams ago where we talked about the Trump assassination. But if it's shrapnel means like a piece of metal. So a bullet was shot from a sniper rifle and it hits something and causes debris, or it causes metal to fly. And that's what grazes Trump. So that is more plausibly like a fake attempt. Like, it's hard to fake assassinating someone and hitting the ear with a bullet. But it's much more easy and plausible to just shoot, into the crowd. And, then there's that can be more of a faked attempt. Like, you just shoot into the crowd. Oh, and it was just an accident that Trump was wounded. It was just, happenstance that he got wounded. They're just trying to fake an assassination attempt. That makes it more plausible that it was actually maybe a certain Middle Eastern country, the most democratic country in the Middle East, that was behind this fake assassination attempt. Why? Because they choose him as their candidate. Trump is the pro-war with Iran candidate. Trump is going to give us everything that we want, as opposed to Kamala or the Democrats. We want Trump in office. His numbers, his popularity is waning. We need to revitalize his campaign. Let's pretend to assassinate him and then blame it on Iran. Interesting theory. Like this, we couldn't really come up with a theory that made sense because of the facts, what we thought were the facts in the case in that previous live stream. But now we have a more coherent, a more plausible theory, conspiracy theory about what was actually motivating this assassination attempt. Who could have had the power and the authority to tell the Secret Service to stand down, or to have this kind of gap in their security and their guarding of the president? Allahu Alam. God knows best. It could have been, our favorite democracy in the Middle East. And to be honest, they have a history of this kind of thing. Isn't that true?
Yeah, so totally.
Okay, this Jimmy Dore clip, I'm not going to get into. I'll do it on another live stream, inshallah, but very, very interesting. He interviews Whitney Webb about a lot of surveillance updates, like how the surveillance state is going to go about monitoring all of us for the sake of national security, quote unquote. Or is it national security, or is it Israeli security? Okay, so that's our show. Let me read the super chats now. Trill Iman says Bibi the Butcher. Jalaluddin says Bibi is a reminder of Dajjal, a deceiver. Chocolate Walla says Musk, who attended the speech, said on X that those who didn't attend the speech are anti-Semitic. Yeah, isn't that interesting? Elon Musk. Whoever doesn't attend Netanyahu's speech and doesn't support Netanyahu is a anti-Semite. This is Elon Musk. Interesting. Judas Fly Chai says shekels for Danny. Thank you for your super chat. Brothers from DK devoted a lot of time on a documentary. Your voice is powerful. We appreciate if you could watch the documentary, okay? Let's continue. Everyone needs to Google 9/11 dancing Israelis. I don't know what that's about. This Discord server, Israeli crime footage, Reddit, Israel exposed, content that the media won't show. Chocolate Wallace sounds like a DEI commercial for the diaper force. I guess he was referring to the soldiers, the diverse soldiers that were shown. Andros, thank you for your super chat. Always appreciated. Alpha Cobra, appreciate it. At this point, I think Satan is worshiping them. Nabil says the Dems who didn't go to the speech are counting Zionist money. Famo says, notice how the piece of expletive broke character and is blatantly talking about all Palestinians and totally veered away from Hamas. I thought it was about Hamas. Yeah, he slipped a couple of times and started blaming all Palestinians. I wonder if a Hamas member was hiding in a hospital in Tel Aviv. Would IDF respond by obliterating the entire hospital and the neighborhood it's in? Good question. What Muslim country will let a Palestinian give a speech? That's a good point. A lot of Dawah channels should talk about Medkhalis. It's as bad as riba. Recently, I asked this question to a well-known Dawah channel, but they discarded the whole argument. Yeah, the Medkhalis are a deviant group. You know, they're a deviant group and they're contributing to the ethnic cleansing and deaths of our Palestinian brothers and sisters and the dominance of Zionists over Masjid al-Aqsa and soon to be other parts of the Muslim world as well. So the Madkhalis are the biggest traitors and they do need to be talked about. Do you feel Israel underestimates the power of social media? Could it lead to their downfall? Their hubris make them not realize how dated their tactics are? Yeah, maybe. Maybe they're not really considering. I mean, they do have their operations, their social media operations, but I don't think they have evolved with the nature of social media to the same extent. Okay. Okay. There's other super chats. I appreciate everyone contributing. May Allah bless you. Thank you for supporting the channel as always. And we'll have another episode coming up very soon next week. And it'll be a good one. Been preparing for it, inshallah. And I'll have my lantern hopefully blazing bright. Have to recharge the batteries. But I hope you enjoyed this analysis of Netanyahu's speech. We continue to make dua for our Palestinian brothers and sisters. And may Allah destroy the tyrants. May Allah destroy these terrorists who are inflicting genocide and mass murder on Palestinian brothers and sisters. Ameen Ya Rab. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to Rumble as well. All of our videos are on Rumble. Mirrored, so you can just subscribe there and subscribe to our newsletter, which you can get to in the description. And that is our show. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave your comments. I do read comments if you've noticed, so leave your comment. Any topics that you want me to cover on future Haqiqat shows, any kind of disagreement that you have with my point of view, feel free to express that. I'd be interested to see what you have to say. And inshallah, we'll catch you on the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.